Okay, folks. There's 100 people in the chat, but it says we have 0. It's because we suck. We're not good at what we do, and we don't know why we're here. Anthony,
you're honest if nothing.
Well, there it is, 111. There it goes. 111. That's a good number, actually. 1111. 100. Well, 1111 or 111. Yeah. Folks, I have a guest with me tonight. Before we get started, I want everybody to say hello to my guest. His name is Christopher. Go ahead and.
Hey, everybody. How you doing?
That's Christopher Jordan from Curious Realm. Looks like the camera's a little bit too. Let me see if I can get this camera angle. There we go. So I get Mushu in there, and then
yeah, there it is.
So Christopher doesn't look like he's like just a giant head.
Yeah, just the Max Headroom look.
Yeah. So Christopher Jordan, you live right around the corner from me.
Yeah, literally just a few miles down the road from each other right now.
And it's crazy. And he has a show called Curious Realm.
Yeah.
And I was on your show. When did you release that one?
That was last week.
Last week, okay.
Yeah.
I was Friday, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Last Friday. So last Friday, I was on Curious Realm. Go check that out. I did I think a little over an hour with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we and Christopher have been friends for a while, and we've been planning on a collaboration and trying to get together to do a collaboration. And we just very busy people. Christopher is a wildly busy person, and so am I. I think you were on the road for like an entire month, right?
I was, 30 days straight. It was 4 cities all around the country. It was, it'll almost be the same thing in August as well, but I'll actually be out for fun at that point. Pretty much every weekend in August, I am at a conference.
Oh, wow.
So, including the upcoming...
Which is
Dogman.
September 1st,
yeah,
and
that's
2nd and 3rd.
Exactly. That rounds out my trip, but I'll be going to the Remote Viewing Association and Monroe Institute Conference, all about remote viewing and things like that. Binaural beats really is what the Monroe Institute is known for.
Monroe, Louisiana? Is that
I wish. No. I'm trying to. I want to say Virginia is where they're based.
Well,
at.
Virginia's better. Go there.
But
Gators.
they kind of pioneered the science of binaural beats like back in the 70s.
I use those.
Yeah, same here.
Some people use them and then they say, "Oh, I get bad dreams with them."
I could see that depending on the frequency.
Yeah, depending on the frequency.
I write a lot of music incorporating binaural beats. Remind me, I'll make sure to email you guys a copy of the new album that I just put out.
I look at the album and it's got like a demon on there.
Yeah,
beats to die by.
Well, what's funny is that years ago when I did avant-garde music, that was really like soundscapes. The way I had described it to people was imagine watching a horror or sci-fi movie without words. Just music and sound effects. That was the kind of music
your mind
I
could just
made.
take you wherever the hell,
But
whatever hell realm it goes to.
I would reverse embed binaural beats of like frequencies that creep you out.
Oh my God.
And like make you feel weird. And people would be like, oh man, I don't know. That music gave me goosebumps. It like really disturbed me. And I'm like, good. Mission accomplished.
You did it.
All right.
And you said, did you
Like,
take the peyote I gave you?
Warping minds for 20 years, you know.
Like, so what was the purpose of that?
It was really just a sound experimenting, playing with sounds. I'm a huge fan of the movie The Exorcist, and of
Which consequently, kill people.
and of subliminal psychology as well. And they used a lot of subliminal work in that movie, like the sounds of all the sounds coming out of Regan once she is possessed, all the growling. There's all the sounds of like pigs and sheep being slaughtered played in reverse.
Yeah.
They used the sound of like wasps and hornets in jars shook up and reversed and embedded under the soundtrack. Just all kinds of things to feed off of your primal fears.
Yeah, because I remember
really
it was one movie that was a horror movie that me and Garetano were talking about off air, and it was like they were using like the sound of like a pitchfork on an old rusty side of a barn or something. I can't remember what movie it was, but it was like, and then they would do it again and go,
that was Nightmare on Elm Street.
Chainsaw Massacre. I think it might have been Chainsaw Massacre.
It may have been.
Yeah.
Well, they're all pretty clever with how they do that sound.
My parents knew the people
yeah.
from the original one because my dad worked he was going understudy as what do you call it? He was trying to learn to become an electrician.
Oh wow!
And he was at the university, and my grandparents had a part-time job there cleaning. And they're just like my parents. They were workaholics. My mother, so then my mom told my dad, hey, they need an electrician. My dad already knew how to be an electrician, but he didn't have his license yet. He eventually became a master electrician, and he worked at Samsung, and he retired. But he went there, and one day they were in the film area, the film department, and my dad and my mom got to meet and be friends with the people from the movie. Then it turned out that I slept in that house as a kid 3 times because the house where they filmed it at, it's like in between Pflugerville, Round Rock, whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
My dad was friends with the guy whose house they used to make that movie. And
wow.
So, it was crazy. I was a little bitty kid, and the movie had just come out or whatever, or they were making it, or they had made it.
This was the remake of it.
No, the original, the 70s,
okay, yeah.
And so my dad said, they filmed a horror movie here. I just remember being like 4 or 5.
Yeah.
And them saying, there was a movie that was, or whatever. And so years later, it was on TV, like network TV, like TBS or something. And my mom was like, you slept in that house and you came out of the room screaming and having a nightmare. I was too little to remember the nightmare, but I remember going there and they had kids and I was playing with them. And so years later, when I was looking at the house, that's when I was watching it. I was like 11 or 12. And I said, the house looks familiar. My mom was like, yeah, you should. You slept in that house. And we were friends with the actors and the people who wrote it because they were at the film at UT. And my mom was like, I was cleaning and I go in there and there's a chainsaw on the table. And then my dad was doing the electrical work there. And my dad's friend, when he talked to him a couple days later, he goes, yeah, they're filming it at my house.
Wow.
So yeah, and the guy, so
that's wild.
And they were kind of hippies too, like hippie people.
Because I actively helped produce a podcast many years ago. Whenever I first moved here to town, and the guy who it was under a pseudonym, he had a really big job at like IBM, things like that. But he actively owned the house that they did the remake at.
Oh wow!
So that's weird that we both have the Texas Chainsaw connection.
That is weird. And then that store, where Jimmy's place used to be out near Rice's Crossing. You remember when we go? I don't know if you were old enough to go out there with Jimmy's. I know Anthony was. Anthony's sick right now, so he ducked out because he don't want to get everybody sick. But yeah, we used to go out there. We drove by that store all the time.
It sounds familiar because I remember you saying something about Jimmy's, but I don't know if I've ever been.
Well, every time we would drive by that store, it was right there where they filmed it. I just remember that guy. My brother makes good head cheese. Like at that point, you don't kick the guy out. You wait till he cuts his hand and starts.
Yeah.
Didn't they film the Transformers movies in your hometown too?
They filmed the Transformers movie. Here's an interesting tidbit, folks, about Dogman and my hometown. Like, once again, and in my book, which is coming out in a few weeks, I cover a story. Hold on one second. My mouth is so dry. I covered a story about a woman that saw a Dogman underneath a railroad car because there's an interchange right there. And one day I got to take you out there and show you. And right there next to Taylor, the Taylor Cafe, is where they filmed the scene on Transformers with Mark Wahlberg and Optimus Prime.
Okay.
Where they're fighting that mercenary. He's like a mercenary. He's
locked down or something like that.
He's a bounty hunter.
Yeah.
He's not a Decepticon. He's not one of these guys. He was just a regular robot that was like, a mercenary.
Yeah.
And so he's fighting, and I guess Optimus and Wahlberg have to fight him together because the guy's it's an uber badass robot, whatever. But every time I see that scene, and they had it playing the other day on TV, and I was kind of halfway watching it, and I was like, they filmed it at that factory right next to Taylor Cafe.
Wow.
Right across the street from there was where my friend, his grandmother, had a Dogman encounter or a werewolf encounter. She calls it a werewolf. I tend to say that's what it was because it involved shape-shifting elements, which is kind of weird. I can actually tell that story quickly here.
Go ahead.
Yeah. We what happened was, and I've talked about this before, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be in the book, and I don't have the notes like in front of me. I wasn't planning on doing all that. I see you brought your notes because you're going to do some talking, so I don't want to take up all the oxygen in the room because my fans will roast me if I take too much time.
There's a lot of extracurriculars involved in my life, all right? Notes help.
Being organized definitely does help.
On occasion, the resin breaks free and things just flow.
Well, you have a sponsor, though. You're one of your sponsors.
I did have a sponsor for a long. I actually had Hops and Grain here in town as a sponsor for a long time. That was back in my Dudes and Beer days, though.
Dudes and Beer.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah. That was the before I relabeled Curious Realm. It was Dudes and Beer for about 5 years. We won awards, all kinds of stuff. It was great. But yeah, it was funny because I guess the first year after my sponsor was when I started doing all my travel work. Mm-hmm. And being an AV technician, we're always traveling with a Pelican. Mm. And people would be like, oh, yeah, what's in your Pelican? And I'd open it up, and it was an 18-pack of beer. Like, I just traveled with beer in Ziploc bags so that whenever I did my show on the road, we still had the beer from my sponsor.
And being prepared.
Christopher is a tech guru. Every time I've gone to a conference in the last 2 years, you've been there. Yeah, and so it's like that's why it was a no-brainer to use you this year to do the. He's gonna.
I can't wait.
He'll be at our conference this year. His show is called Curious Realm, and Curious Realm. How long has Curious Realm been around? Before I get into this dog.
It'll be close to 2 years coming up.
2 years.
Yeah.
And so Daniel Jones did it last year, and not to take away anything from Daniel, but Daniel, you know, he doesn't. He's not there to do that. That's
Yeah.
not his job. So Daniel's going to be on the panel this year, and Daniel, he's like you. He does a lot of. Y'all know each other. Right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
He does a
Very
lot
good
of
friends.
UFO work, and so
Yep.
do I. I do a lot of. It's funny because I was in a chat room, not chat the other day, but on a group, and this lady goes, "Aren't you a Dogman person?" And I'm like in an alien abduction group with 211,000 people, whatever. And I said, "Lady, I'm in anything that's got to do with anything paranormal." She goes, "Well, this isn't paranormal, and Dogman's not paranormal." And I'm like, "What do you think paranormal is?"
Anything outside of the norm, I'm pretty sure that is the actual definition.
That's the actual definition.
People need a dictionary sometimes.
People don't use words correctly. The literal definition. You know.
I had a lady at a conference not too long ago come up and ask me when I was going to correct a guest for not saying cryptozoology instead of zoology. And I was like, probably the first time one of them calls themselves a cryptozoologist. And I was like, as soon as one of them does that, I will use that term the whole show. But none of them refer to each other or themselves as such.
And what does it matter whether they call themselves cryptozo or cryptozoo or
it really doesn't.
cryptocurrency?
It really doesn't.
I don't care what you call yourself.
Yeah,
dude.
well,
Like,
and once again, it's one of those, like, that's a big thing that I do on my show is we try to demystify things. I love talking, spitballing, but really when it comes down to it, it's like, what do we have? Because, even with the UFO thing, like that was the big thing about the NASA panel that happened a couple weeks ago, was that they were like, a lot of scientists think this is fringe science, and the problem with that is there's a 2 to 5% anomaly, and that is our job as scientists.
Yeah.
Is to find that anomaly. So, speaking of anomaly, you were about to share a Dogman story.
Oh, let me knock that out real quick.
Do
just
that.
so everybody will know what I'm talking about.
Exactly.
You'll find it in the book too, folks. It was a friend of mine's grandmother, and he had an encounter too, but it was later on. Real quick here, she was walking to Taylor Cafe to get some barbecue because it's right there in the south side of Taylor. And when she was walking near the railroad tracks, there back in the 60s and 70s, there had been a lot of bad things that had happened in that area. So when people would walk through there, you know, people were very cautious. And so she kind of looked around and watched her surroundings. And she's an older African-American woman. I just remember as a kid going over there and her telling me about the haint. My friend Theo's grandmother said the same thing. The black folks would call it the haint. The white folks would call it a werewolf.
Yep.
And the Mexicans called it the hombre lobo de Cadejo. And they always had these different names, right? And I always just thought it was bullcrap because I didn't believe in it. And they would tell me as a kid, and I'd be like, yeah, okay, this thing again. Yeah, okay, sure. I'll look over my shoulder and be worried about it, which I really was not worried about at all. I did not believe in these stories at all.
Yeah.
And so, and even though you hear it a bunch, you think it's just a local legend or a rumor. And, you know, it's all the older generation, they believed in it. You know, like the boomers were the last generation that really believed in it. But there were multiple people in my generation that ended up experiencing it. And I ended up being one of them. But this is, you know, before that. And she was walking by and she looks over to her left and she sees this very large, homeless looking guy laying underneath the railroad tracks, whatever. And so she goes into the barbecue joint in Taylor Cafe, and she comes out. And when she comes out, she sees what looks like a werewolf, like a giant werewolf. Like she said, it was laying on his side sleeping, but it had that guy's clothes, like they were ripped. And the guy, and she goes, there was a guy, like a homeless guy. She called him a hobo, you know, back then.
Wow.
The rail rider,
Yeah,
what they
sure.
called him. She said, I thought it was just a hobo, wino rail rider.
Yeah.
And she said, I see what looks like a freaking werewolf. You could see the arms and the legs, kind of like it had the backward bent legs, and it was laying up underneath it. And so it made you wonder, like, I was a kid when I heard, I was about 11 years old, you know, and I asked my dad about it. And my dad didn't deny it. He didn't go, oh, it's a bunch of bull crap, blah, blah, blah. He just goes, don't ever walk around that area by yourself. It's just not safe. He goes, there's a lot of weird stuff over there. He didn't say weird people. He just said weird stuff. And I was like, what the heck? And then when I said something else about it, he goes, can we not talk about that? And like, he dismissed that subject on me multiple times. I often wondered, you know, if he had something happen to him that he just never was willing to talk about. because my grandfather claimed that there was something weird that they saw when they were, in all places, Michigan. And he said, I'll let your dad tell it. And my dad never told me. But my grandfather did tell me when he was in Louisiana, near Alexandria, that him and my grandmother, who I later confirmed my grandmother because they were separated when I was older. My grandfather was so damn mean, but he was just crazy. And my grandma told me, she's like, that's true. That really happened. And she'd be the first one to call my grandpa out on bull crap, you know?
Yeah.
Like when I was stealing, sheep and goats with him.
As you
And
do.
my grandmother was the first one to tell me, well, congratulations, you're a thief. She didn't go, oh, that's not good. It's like my grandpa had me helping him still, livestock.
Sure. Yeah.
And she's like, your grandpa's a damn outlaw. He shouldn't do things like that, And then, it became an issue of whether I should go with grandpa or not because he would give me beer and let me shoot a 38 out, a 357 out the window of, out there in Pinto Canyon near Marfa.
I don't know about
so-
you, Chris, but that just sounds like great bonding experience.
Hey, man, I'm Cajun. That's family.
That's his family.
You're Cajun?
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
Yes.
That's nothing
That
to you.
explains, yeah. And for us, it's the Rougarou.
The Rougarou, yeah.
But at the same token, and we talked about this and touched a little bit about it on my show. Some of that reticence can come culturally as well, because there is kind of that attitude of you just don't talk about the witchery unless you want to deal with the witchery.
Well, that's what's
right.
interesting is because I had that kind of similar thing come with my mom, but anything that she would tell me that was kind of supernatural, I would never doubted it. It was just like, okay, yeah, that's what it is. And
Your mom talked about a lot of it.
And I would also talk to my family members, and they would talk about little things, and I'll just be like, yep, that's completely true. I never had that area of oh, I don't believe that, or I don't.
Yeah.
I've never seen it, so I don't believe it. So that's why it's really interesting to hear that you had so many years of oh, you're just making up stories that scare me, and then you see it.
Yeah. Well, your mom told me a story one time. I think it was about your uncle, or ask her about this. And I just thought about it the other day. The weirdest things come to me. I'll be working out, and I'll be like, dude, I forgot all about that. And it'll hit me. And that's why I love working out. You're all in your own little world for an hour and a half. Nobody distracts you. Ask your mom about the snake, the guy that turned into the snake.
Ooh.
If
I don't
she
know if I heard
remembers
that
that. If she remembers that story, she told me that. I think she told me that one back. You were probably 10 or 11 years old. You were a little bitty dude. And I remember her telling us a story about that. And I think Chad was there and we were all talking. But that's a good thing about having, a bond with your family for since you were a little bitty kid, because, we can go back and reference.
Yeah.
Because when he was little, that house was haunted too. You lived in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I remember one time I was asleep there and I thought Leah, your sister, was pushing me to wake me up because she would always come out there and she would jump, when she was little, like a little older than a toddler. She did not understand, if I jump with my knees first onto someone's stomach, you could hurt them.
Yeah.
And she was and Chad had her in kickboxing and all kinds of stuff. And so I felt this boom, something on my side. And I kind of fell into the couch and I sat up and I was ready to scream at her and go, what the hell? And I look and there's nobody there. And I was asleep on one couch and Zane was asleep on the other, on the recliner.
That's funny because my first ghost I ever saw was there. It was a little girl.
Yeah.
And I told you about that, I think, and then you were telling me, that makes a lot more sense.
Makes
But
a lot
you would
of
always
sense.
see shadows in there and stuff. And you always said, I think at this point.
Well, Hamid saw something.
Yeah.
He saw a little girl, he thought it was Leah, but he saw a little girl run around the corner and go out to the garage. And then 2 minutes later, this guy used to live with them, rent a room from them. And he worked for me. And he told me and Anthony and Scorpion that he was the little kid ran around the corner right in front of him. And then right after that, he had ordered a pizza. Remember how he would order pizza?
He would order pizza almost every day.
Every day, yeah.
And he wouldn't tip. He
And
wouldn't tip.
tip. And I don't want to get into it,
And
man.
then when I would order pizza, the guys would look at me bad. I'm like, I tip. Why are you guys being mean?
Yeah.
I'm not him.
Yeah, I don't want to get into it because I know that they got some revenge on him for that. But he was walking out and he said, he goes, I was going into the living room and then I see Leah because he thought it was her. But it wasn't her. And he said the girl that he saw was a little older, a little bigger than her. And I remember that bird, the Lulu. She would be sitting there and all of a sudden she would start flying around the cage like something was trying to grab her. And she would be pecking at the air. And I told your sister, I was like, what the hell is she doing?
Huh.
And so eventually, though, I think your mom, she did a cleanse or something and got rid of whatever it was. But there was something there for a while. You know, I remember being out in the garage one time, and I was there with your stepdad, and the garage just started going by itself. And he was just like, "Oh well, yeah, it's just, there's a ghost here that messes with stuff. You know, it just wants to be seen."
Yep.
And I was just like, "Okay, well, it's doing a good job because it's being seen." You know,
I had one ent that followed me for years, and oddly enough, not really at the new place, but yeah, like my wife finally started witnessing it, where I would have something and set it down and turn around and come back and it would be gone, and she'd be like, "You just had that in your hand." I was like, I know. Yeah, it was the wildest thing. I'd be looking frantically for something for 20, 30 minutes and go back and it would be right where I thought I put it.
Yeah.
It was the weirdest thing in the world.
I can't trust myself enough to put something down and be like, did I just lose it? Because I don't trust myself. I'll be like, I definitely just lost it, right?
Yeah. Well, and like I was saying before we started in the show, we moved up here to Cedar Park, I guess up around August, something like that. And my son about October was like, "I like this house. It's nice. The ghosts aren't here."
Dude, and you came from South Austin.
Yeah.
And when that happened, how did that make you feel? Like,
Me and my wife both looked at each other and went like, "All right," because there were definitely some. There were numerous families even right there in our neighborhood that had stories like, "Oh yeah, my aunt lived there." All kinds of things used to happen. Like, "Oh yeah, my aunt died there like a decade ago."
at that house?
Yeah. Like the neighbors. The neighbors. Like it used to be that our neighbor directly next door, it was his aunt that he said had died there. Because he was like, "Yeah, they lived there for like 8-9 years, something like that." So
Somebody in the chat, just Froetian says, "Oh no, wait, not Froetian." It says an imp. They're asking if that's what you.
could be.
Brett Lawford.
Could very
You
well
say
be.
int or imp?
Int is what I called him,
int.
short for entity.
Entity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was his nickname. Yeah. I find it easier to give them a name because then you can just directly address them.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, because you
even if you're giving them the name, it's kind of like whenever you got that buddy that it's like,
Oh,
we
I
just
don't know if you want to test
Douche
that.
yeah. Well, like I said in the episode you were on, my nickname in college was Waldo.
Waldo.
Like my wife was introduced to me as Waldo.
Yeah, you told me that.
Not as Chris. When we found each other on Facebook like 10, 15 years ago, I had
On the dating app, you put Waldo.
Yeah,
Where's
well,
Waldo?
it was so
You want to
long.
find out?
It was so long ago on Facebook that you still had to know them from school.
Wow.
Because if you remember, that's how Facebook started.
Yeah.
It was a whole college connection thing.
Yeah.
So like you had to know each other from going to school together. So it was one of those. She was like, "How do I know you from school?" And it was like, "Oh, well, you were my buddy Chris's girlfriend, and I used to come over there and play bass, and with Chris and Chris and Chris. It was
The Chris.
two guitarists named Chris and Chris, the bassist. It was interesting. Yeah, it was a nexus of the universe.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. You got so much material, and we've had lots of in-depth conversations, me and you. But let me ask you a question here. Now I know UFOs are your kind of your wheelhouse.
I love them.
But you've done a lot of work and been in so many. Every time I'm at a conference, you're there. And it's I think the last one we did was in San Antonio.
Yeah.
Okay, and that was the Kling brothers. They have Ghost Lab or whatever.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, and the Kling brothers, they're on TV, right? They have a TV show or something.
I think they're working on another one right now. I know that they just started up a new detective group doing things and kind of rebranding themselves, things like that. From what I understand.
I had a long talk with one of them, the bigger guy. I forgot his name.
Yeah. Barry, I believe.
Barry, yeah. And I know that conference, David Weatherly was there, Ken and Lyle were there.
That conference went fantastically well. I mean, considering the weather and the fact that it had been basically, "Hey guys, sorry, we won't have vendors outside," things like that. Like they had the place sold out.
Yeah.
It was enough that by the time you were there, they were like, "Yeah, we're definitely doing this in a bigger space."
Yeah.
You know,
because it was a small venue.
oh,
but
it was a really small.
It was really
venue.
cozy though.
was
That
It was
packed.
great.
Yeah.
It was really great. Like for
I met
that
Greg
show,
Lawton
it was
there.
it was
his name
really
Lawton?
fantastic. Yes,
I think
I need to get in touch with him. He was
same.
pretty,
we saw David's.
We saw David's presentation,
Yeah,
which
that's
I had
right.
never seen in its entirety.
That's right. That's
Still
why-
haven't. Because I showed up
We
about
showed up a little late.
15 minutes
so
in.
the tail end
So,
of it,
when we were
but-
at dinner the other night, I told David, I said, do the presentation for me because I've never. And he's looking around like, right here in the restaurant. I was like, yes, please go ahead. Let's
just stand up.
see what you're going to do because I want to know because I need to know what I'm working with her. You know? And he's like, well, you weren't paying attention in Tennessee. I said, no, I couldn't.
Like, you were busy running a
I
show.
was running around.
You were running a
we
conference.
Were joking though, but you know what's crazy though? Like at that conference, it was so loud because the tables were all around the sides, and so me and Ken were like, not next time. We cannot do this because that one lady, she turned around and she looked right at me like I was the one talking. I'm just sitting at my table. And there's all these people talking and doing whatever. She turns around and goes, some people pay good money to be here. And she's looking right at me like I'm the one talking. I'm like, I'm just sitting here. I'm like Richard Pryor and moving.
Yeah.
I just sharpened my pencil, lady. I don't even know what's going on.
Me and
I
Anthony
don't know
were
why you're
confused.
screaming at me. I'm just like sitting here.
Me and Anthony were just trying to sell stuff, make a little money, and we're like,
Everybody got real
wanna
quiet
buy
because
this?
she
You want
turned
some
around and
more?
screamed at everybody.
Yeah.
And I was just
I
like,
remember.
dude, chill out, man. I don't know why you're mad at me. And then Ken, he put all of his disgusting cheap Tom snacks on
Shasta.
Kenny Irish's table. And Kenny comes up and then Kenny was like, why me? And I was like, Ken thought because you only had one book to sell, you wouldn't mind. And he goes, well, I kind of do. And so I just went over there and was like, knocked everything onto the ground. Ken comes back and he goes, who threw all this Shasta on the ground? And Barton's like, I did it. I hate Shasta. I hate people do it around me. It's just like, and then Ken was all like, feelings hurt, like, why? Shasta's delicious. He goes, it's disgusting because he drinks Coke, And I'm like, dude, he's trying to pickle his organs for science. Like, I explained that to Ken so he would understand,
Yeah, the whole self-preservation, the living Buddha thing. Like, preserve himself with Coca-Cola.
A million years from now, the aliens dig us up, and there's Barton perfectly preserved. This man must have been a
Just
god.
glistening with caffeine and sugar crystals.
Like he must have been
Just
revered.
soaked through his pores.
They buried him with a giant sword,
It's like he's inside of his own amber.
and his sugary drinks must have been their nourishment. But
the nectar of the gods.
Yeah, nectar of the gods. It was a crazy conference. It was a crazy thing, and I just thought we had so much fun. Why not do more than a day this time? So we decided to go
absolutely.
for a couple days.
Yeah.
What was that, Doris? We have to hear Anthony dying in there.
Thanks, Sugar Britches and Larry Fisher for the dose.
Thank you for those donations, man. Stop coughing, man. You're really being rude in there with your sickness.
Yeah.
People are like trying to talk and laugh, and you're just being a buzzkill.
Does he need the oxygen can?
I'm not letting him use it though.
I gotta say though, I can feel his pain. I have been just all kinds of congested from the friggin' allergies lately.
Well, once
It's
I
been
get
nuts.
sick, I feel it too. But when I'm not, I don't care.
Yeah. I think my years of youth ministry and working with children just gave me a raging immune system. I don't
Oh, really?
like I get
Imagine.
sick like once every 2 or 3 years.
I think whatever
like,
third
my
world.
wife's like, I don't know what's up with you. I don't know why that happens. I'm like, well,
It's
just
that
be happy.
typo. What's
Yeah.
it called?
That
The RH.
that's right.
negative?
It's that RH negative blood.
Because
I
you
would
got that pale
thankfully-
skin and the yeah.
That's right.
I was thankfully just poisoned slowly by my mother with her third world creations, so
Oh,
that made me so strong.
Dude, there's only twice in my entire life that I ate something so hot that I questioned my mortality, and I'm not joking.
Oh yeah.
One time was when she gave me some kind of black sauce, and we were eating pho. His mother's Vietnamese, right? And she's like, "You like pho?"
You gotta
Oh,
watch it with those Vietnamese spices,
No,
man.
dude. Oh, my
they
goodness
like
gracious.
different worlds of hot.
No, any spice that you have to cook for like
It was
2
black.
days
Yeah.
to
Whatever
get
it
it
was.
started, like that's insane. Like she has to boil that and like process
She's
it for
gotta
2
reduce
days.
down and reduce.
She looks
down
like a
and
witch
reduce
too, and she's
down.
like stirring the cauldron.
this is the
Eye
big
of
old
nude.
pot.
It's like I go up there to like
throwing handfuls of leaves and sticks in. And,
fire.
Yeah.
It was crazy because like the whole kitchen burned my eyes. And one of my friends, he has a Chinese kitchen down on the drag, and we go down there. and he'll make mine, and if you go up and try to breathe it, it's actually giving me, like, thinking about it, it's like synesthesia. But
Yeah.
dude, it burns the hell out of your face, and his whole kitchen. Excuse me. Woo, it's making me think about it, man. The whole kitchen would just smell like cilantro and like hot fire. I mean,
Thai peppers.
oh my God. And I remember on the counter, she would have like the dried, and then she'd have chile piquin. I recognized it. And then I saw serranos and jalapeno and all these. I said, Dad, you're going to put all of that in there? She goes, yeah, it has to be hot. And then she gave me this black stuff, which I don't know what was in it. So I put some of that in there, and then your sister was like, "That's too much," and it was a little scooper, itty bitty. And I took a bite, and you don't taste the hot right away typically. No. This was like the first bite. I was like, oh, and I can eat hot stuff. And then I got up and I was looking for the window, dude, to crawl out of.
To give you an idea of like how hot it is, like to test it out. We don't even use spoons. We use toothpicks.
Toothpicks,
Yep.
yeah.
Just a single toothpick. And it's like, yep, that's good. That killed me.
Yeah. One of my family, it was always the tiny Tabasco peppers. And just putting them in a jar with vinegar. And just soaking them. And that was the Tabasco. And yeah, like some of my friends up in Maine one time were like, oh, yeah, it can't be that bad. I'm like, yeah, try it with the toothpick, man.
Dude,
Trust me.
Yankees can't handle that stuff,
they
dude.
put a little bit in a spoon, and they were like, oh, that's tangy. I was like,
Exactly. That's getting my mouth watery.
No, that's just the apple cider vinegar, my man. Hold on. And then it was like, oh my God. I was like, yeah, there it is. There's that gumbo flavor.
Let me tell you, if you ever get a chance to be up in Oklahoma, because you go to Oklahoma pretty regularly with the conferences.
Yeah,
if you're ever up there in Durant, okay, the Amish people they have an Amish settlement there. They have a store as you're leaving Durant. And the Choctaws there. And I haven't been in a couple years because I've been broke, but I used to go and, I'd play every now and then. And so we stopped there one time, and they had these pickles, and they're like spears. And they said, it's a hot pickle spears. And I asked the lady that worked there, she's Mennonite, I guess, because the Amish themselves don't. So, and she goes, I got to warn you. She's like, those are pretty hot. And I said, like, how hot? Because I could eat really hot stuff. And I said, I've only been burned one time. That was by your mom's food. And she's like, okay. I said, my mom's, she's Latin. I can eat it, And she's like, okay. So I bought like 3 jars. And I took them home. And he ate, Tony, me and Tony are the hot eaters, right? He ate one, and he told me, he said, dude, that is hot as fire, dude. It's pretty rough. But I mean, it didn't perturb you from eating them, right?
No, I mean it was one of those things where like it builds on you. So like you could take 2 or 3 bites and you'll be good. But then on that 4th bite, it all like hits you at once. Yeah. And that was bad about it. It was just like a wait, boom. Yeah. That was horrible. But I was smart enough to just eat him by himself. This big fool over here decided, dude, I'm gonna roll them in cayenne.
I rolled it completely in cayenne. And then I put this Yellowbird sauce, remember the Serrano? And I put Yellowbird sauce on it. And so then I just ate it. And I ate the whole thing. And it was one of those, like you said, it snuck up on me. And then Anthony, he ate just one of the pickles. Never mind the rolling it in cayenne. Oh, my gosh. It was bad. I thought literally about my life. Like, my life was flashing before me. And I was like, I started praying. I'm not bullcrapping. I mean, Anthony... It was wintertime. We were sitting there trying to watch like Spider-Man or something, and Anthony's sitting there, and my brother's like, are y'all okay? And Anthony's like, no.
He's got his like
he ate the wings without it.
Where you go and you have to like sign a waiver.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like
Pepper Palace.
What the what?
Well, he was sitting there like at his mouth just in front of the window, just letting that cold air just go into it. But it was one of those heat that like
so bad. And I was pouring water on my mouth.
Got like an ice pack in your mouth.
And I don't like milk.
Helped.
But I took milk and was swishing it around.
Oh yeah.
Nothing helped.
Yeah.
I tried bread. I tried crackers. None of those remedies did anything at all.
At that point, though, it was like already too late. It was already too ingrained in your taste buds to get rid of it.
Yeah.
That's why I waited. And I think the worst part was that it's one of those like heats that like makes you hiccup. So then you're just like you can't really breathe right because you're just hiccuping the whole time.
And your stomach immediately burns.
Like, nose, oh my! Your whole face is just numb.
Running like crazy. Yeah.
My throat was burning. Everything was burning. Dude, let me tell you, when I was down in South Austin, we lived in a haunted house, and I don't know if I've talked about this to you before. But it was like once I left living down there, I felt like I had moved away from a hostage situation.
Yeah.
It was that bad because my mother's house, initially I moved in with her for like a month, which is, God rest her soul, me and my mother, that's all we could stand of each other. Because she's what do you call it? She's OCD to the nth degree she was. And she was super clean and everything had to be, and we shared an office and she would go in there and be like, my pen was moved, and I'm like, good grief, But she had a ghost in her house, and it would do. Sometimes I would see a shadow or something, and my Uncle Jaime would be like, "There's a ghost here," and I'm like, "Dude, I just came from like the Amityville, dude. I'm not. This is nothing. Your little ghost that putters around and every now and then moves a little bit of stuff. It's like whoopie doo, It's like it was bad. Well, when you were down in South Austin, I thought it was funny because I made the joke that South Austin's super haunted.
Yeah,
and it is.
Yeah.
Every time I hear about a ghost story, it's rarely like up here, It's like, oh yeah, I was living in South Austin. I'm like, oh, okay. Something grabbed you through a mirror. Yeah. Why do you think that is?
Probably because it is classic Austin, I mean, pretty much there and just the outskirts, like the MLK area, stuff like that. Like those, whenever you're looking at things like Dazed and Confused, that kind of stuff, like, that's the Austin that they're talking about.
Yeah.
Like,
that's because when I first moved here, that's where I lived, was in the classic Austin, 1990.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All of that is really old Austin. I mean, I know the house that we were living in was smooth early 70s construction.
Yeah.
Just by the way some of the things were built and,
Our house?
put together.
Is it the early 90s?
What, my house?
No, the house we're at right now.
The house we were at right now is mid-90s.
Mid-90s?
Yeah.
Okay.
Odd thing is, when that was being built, that subdivision, it was about a year after ours was built. They were still building out there, and I did security out there. I went out there, and I went probably guarded about 2 streets over from where my house that I'm living at now was being built. And it was just rock everywhere, and I couldn't drive very far up in there.
Yeah.
And it was just woods everywhere, dude. And at night, all you heard was crickets, and it was just creepy. And it was only a few years removed from what I had seen. And I didn't like being out there at all. And anytime I had to be out in the middle of nowhere, it was always because of my job.
Yeah.
Yeah. And oddly enough, the girl that was on our show on Tuesday's podcast, Jenna Perry, she's going to talk about her Dogman experience, I think, on Tuesday. Where she had her Dogman experience was only, I think, about 2 miles from Driftwood Cemetery, and I guarded that place when they had to like move some of the bodies, and I had to I worked there probably 20-something years ago, and I was out in the middle of nowhere. You know where the cemetery's at and stuff?
Yeah.
And I was out there, and one of the pieces of machinery, those little I don't know what they're called. I work construction security all the time. Yeah, and it's got the little crane, the bucket scoop, and one of those had a light on it, dude, and it literally came on and then went and moved and pointed right at me. So doing security, I was like, first I was annoyed because I had to wake up and be like, oh, what is this? No, I'm just joking. It's real effective, right?
What?
Yes, I get up and I'm like, what is this, dude? And I was, of course, it was like 1 or 2 in the morning, and I'm like listening to Coast to Coast. And if I remember correctly, it was about aliens and stuff.
Yeah.
And, George Norrie's over there like, why are aliens so scary? I'm like, well, I'm about to find out. Because am I being abducted or is this a ghost? So I get out of my vehicle and I walk over there, and I'm like trying to be as brave and as loud and big as possible, and I'm like, I'm armed. And I actually wasn't. And I was like, I'm armed, and I'm like, I point the flashlight at the where the guy should be. There's nobody there, and it did this twice.
Wow.
And I said, look, I'm not comfortable working in a cemetery doing security because if something's there, it's going to mess with me. I'm going to feel it. I'm going to know it. And I told my boss that, and he was just like, okay, whatever, But yeah, there was a lot of places around Austin, and most of it was in the South or the East where you would get really weird stuff that would happen. And you go back and you check the history of these places, and you're like, dude, because where she went to the wedding that ended up, and then she stayed at an Airbnb, that's the guest on Tuesday, was right there by Driftwood. And so she stayed in Dripping Springs, but the wedding was in Driftwood. And I forgot to ask her the venue, but I would hazard to guess it's probably where, what's it called? The Salt Lick. Because, they have that extra venue, whatever. That's probably where it was. I think that's what I would think. I don't know where else it might be. I forgot to ask that question, but yeah, that whole area is creepy as heck, man. And I've had some weird encounters out of that area. And a lot of UFOs come out of the south of Austin too.
Yep. Yeah.
What did you bring us, Chris?
Well, I've actually been over the last couple weeks doing a lot of the UFO coverage that's happened. Like we had a huge spurt of it for about 2 weeks. We had the NASA panel that happened on UFO UAP study, and then right after that was the first report from David Grush about the alien whistleblower saying that we have crash retrieval programs. And then right after that was the 3-hour long, I guess it turned into 4-hour long press conference from Dr. Stephen Greer about disclosure and the Disclosure Project, everything else. So it's really been jam-packed lately. And it's one of those that I follow a lot of threads, but I've always been fascinated by aircraft. I guess, had an obsession with Air Force aircraft when I was in junior high school, things like that. And it's just always fascinated me, the leaps of technology that we have. And even over the last couple years, like one of the things in the NASA panel was the Go Fast video. And I was so happy. One of my guests that I have on regular, Mike Turber, and I have been saying for the last couple of years that, like, Gimbal is an amazing video. The stuff from Roosevelt, stuff from the Franklin, absolutely awesome stuff. But the Go Fast video in particular was just really strange. And the scientists from NASA basically started breaking down and pointing out in his slide presentation, like, I don't know why everybody's all confused. This is a military airplane. Like, this camera, all of this data on the camera is telling us the azimuth of the camera from the target. Like, it's giving us a distance to the target. It's giving us all the information we need to trigonometry the speed of this object. Wow. And once he was done with like the 3 or 4 slides showing the math, it was basically an object about 4 miles away from the background, which was the ocean, about 10 miles away from the plane that was tracking it, and going about 40 miles an hour. So he was like, we pretty well assume the fact that this is a balloon caught in jet stream, something like that. But he's like, well, our job is to figure out the science. What the object is, I have no idea, but it's only going 40 miles an hour, not the perceived 10,000 miles an hour or 5,000 that people think it's going.
Yeah. Somebody asked the name of the guest. The name of the guest is Bubblish Fisheye. I know you guys have heard me talk about this man many, many times, and now here he is.
We're a big fan, and he finally joined us.
We're a big fan of his work. Curious Realm, Bubblicious Fisheye. No,
Bubblicious Fisheye.
This is Christopher Jordan.
I'll always take a new name, man.
Yeah, better than Waldo.
It's,
well, no one would find him.
It's up there.
That's right. Where's Bubblicious Fisheye? Here he is. So this is Christopher Jordan from Curious Realm.
Hey, everybody.
And that's... So yeah, that's who's talking.
Yeah.
So I have a couple questions for you now. I haven't been, because I have had so much going on.
Oh yeah, man! You're in the middle of 2 books. You do a show 4 or 5 nights a week.
It's
you actually have a life and a wife.
I have my wife. Is my wife. Yeah, that's pretty much. I see her, and that's about it. And she tries to tell me to slow down, and everybody tells me to calm down and slow down, and.
I don't. I tell you to ramp it up.
Yeah. And I get kind of out of hand or whatever, and then they pull out the pepper spray and they're like, "Sir, you need to have on pants if you're going to be in public." And I'm like, "Okay, officer, I'm sorry, I forgot them. I was
just getting on the bus.
I forgot them again. I'm super busy, you know." It's like, dude.
My wife just tells me that I can't go to the mailbox and check it with my robe. It's like,
what's the point?
It's only half a block. Like, I'm in my robe. I got pants on.
Well, that was the it was the Chin. Was it Gigante? What was his name? Vincent. The Chin.
Oh yeah.
He walked around in his robe, muttering to himself for years, pretending to be crazy.
Like, it's not like I'm going Tony Soprano and I'm like in a wife beater in my boxers, going half a block to check the mail in my flip-flops.
Well, in The Sopranos, there was a lot of references to old gangsters. That was one of them. That Tony would go check the newspaper every day, and I used to do that. I used to walk out and check my mail. Got to the edge of the street. And my brother bought me those. I didn't want to watch it. He kept saying, "You got to check this out. You got to check it out." And I finally watched it, and it became one of my favorite shows. That and The Shield.
Oh God, The Shield, man.
Chiklis is a freaking him and
that I think I have seen both of those series probably about at least a good 10 or 12 times.
Yeah.
I mean, at some point, just YouTube will show me a bunch of them, and I'll get back into it again. Like it just never leaves you. And I think when I first watched it, I was too young to really understand it as well. And I rewatched it as I got older, and like how important the dialogue is into the whole thing. You really don't understand unless you can really like find the hidden pieces of it.
The action is really good in those too.
Oh yeah,
like some shows
really
they
well
get too cerebral, and then they don't ever. I think as far as like shows in the last 20 years or something that have had an impact. Of course, Game of Thrones. I mean, that has to be.
Yeah.
I think The Sopranos, Walking Dead, they really started getting
petering down after
I would fall asleep after the third season. I was falling asleep, and that was a dead giveaway. No pun intended.
Yeah,
it was zombifying me. No pun intended again. But it was The Sopranos, The Shield. I think that those two, and then I think another one that really sticks with me. Like I'll always I kind of reference that. But it wasn't a movie. It was Lord of the Rings. It was
about
movies, and then I was going to say Rome. If you haven't seen Rome, oh my gosh, dude,
that was a great one.
I think the best scene ever when he's, I'm not going to give it away, but when he's like in the arena, and finally you're waiting for Varenus, right, to jump in there, and finally he does something. He can't just sit there. I thought about it. I was like, I wouldn't do it. I couldn't sit there and let that happen. It's not, but folks, if you haven't seen those shows, go check them out. They're not paranormal, but they're pretty good.
Is that the one where he's like, I pray to Jupiter that you survive?
That was Caligula.
Yeah.
Yes.
Speaking of Caligula, after he died, he became a ghost. There was a lot of, they say on the Palatine Hill that they saw him for years.
Yep.
Until they actually did a sort of an exorcism in their own way. Like they went out there and they burned like cinnamon and sage, and they had a proper, what they considered to be a Roman burial, because Caligula, the way he was killed. And there's a lot of speculation as to what his role was, because the Catholic Church, the long-held belief was that Nero was the Antichrist, the 666. It spells his name. Yeah. And then Caligula would have been his Agrippina would have been Nero's mother, would have been Caligula's sister.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was Claudius. He immediately ascended the throne after Caligula, and then she politicked and she slept with him, her own uncle, to get Nero on the throne. Yeah. And then later Nero had her killed because Nero killed everybody. Yeah. And his dying words, he was such a sociopath. He's like, what an artist the world is losing. And it's like, yeah, okay. And in your own mind, amigo, but sure, whatever.
It was pretty crazy. Just one after another, Caligula, then Nero. Just two horrible, horrible people.
Horrible. And then they weren't even of the Caesarian bloodline. They just, it kind of got off the rails. It was just, and then I think after Augustus and the Pax Romana, it just kind of, the whole thing went off the rails. I mean, it was like, dude, you had 40 years of peace, and then, ridiculousness.
Things went crazy.
Well, that's what happens. 40 years of peace brings about the worst.
Until you ended up with Elagabalus, who was walking backwards, carrying a rock in honor of the sun.
Going to war against Poseidon and stuff.
Yeah, and then he had like an Egyptian charioteer that would beat him in public, and you're like, what the heck? Can you imagine? Like I thought GW was like the worst until now, but then I'm thinking at least we don't have Elagabalus. Yeah, who's like, can you imagine? He's walking through DC. Okay.
Yeah, just getting flagellated.
Flocked.
Yeah,
by an Egyptian charioteer.
Shame. Shame.
And let me ask you a question. Like as far as UFO and all this, the aliens, like I had this conversation with the other Christopher Gaetano, who will be at the conference too, unveiling Haunting We Will Go.
Cool.
And we talked a lot about science fiction on our show. Folks, if you go back and you listen to the episode, it's only got a few thousand, 4,000 or 5,000 views on last, Thursday's show. If you go back and check that out. And Anthony had named it like Shifting Paradigm or something, and I changed it to, because at the last 20, 30 minutes, we're talking about ghosts and what in his encounters. And so I thought that we needed to change it so it'd be more interesting to tell like what we're talking about on there and to get it more views, because somebody saw that too. They were like, "Oh, you changed the name," and I said, "Yes, it's the same show, but I wanted to talk a little bit about what we talked about, because I wanted people to check it out, because the overarching theme of those 3 episodes I did with him were about cinema and how horror and science fiction have influenced us, and maybe that's what influences people seeing things, or maybe we seeing things has created cinema, or both. You know, this weird cross-pollination. Yeah. And I was going to ask you, as far as like, do you think that our ideas of what an alien should be, or what, you know, intergalactic, whatever you want to call it, is it something like, you know, because I talked to one of the guys down at the UFO conference last summer at the mall there, Mall of the Americas.
Yeah,
I was there with Daniel
Wonderland.
Wonderland, yeah, and Ryan Edwards was there, and Anne Celine and Ken Gerhardt, and we were all there, and we were hanging out, and I talked to this one lady who was very interesting. She wrote a book, and she was talking about how, well, it wasn't her that was saying it was her friend, but she was signing autographs, but her friend was like talking about how she believes that our ideas of what aliens should be has literally led to some confusion and causing us to create it. In other words, like, you get abduction scenarios where people see a typical, like, what looks like a Klingon, you know what I mean? Like, they see it in the background. And I got a story, and the reason I bring this up is because there was this girl that gave me a story not too long ago, and it started with her live-in boyfriend I guess common law husband. And she said he had an encounter, and in the background of this encounter, after he was messed with or whatever, he saw what looked like a Klingon-type creature. And so the first thing is gonna come to my mind is like, are you a fan of Star Trek? And she goes, I'm not. She goes, I think he is. I'm not real sure, but that's what he described to me. He won't really talk a lot about it. When I got him on the phone, he said it was just what he saw in the background. And so the question is, did somebody who created that show or somebody who worked on that show, were they basing it on something? I mean, what are your thoughts about that? And he didn't get a real good look at it, or was it in his psyche that made him think that?
You know, it is an interesting thing, psychology and the way that our brains work. I was having a conversation with my wife the other day about pareidolia. And the idea that our brains strive for pattern. They want pattern. Pattern is how we have survived for millions of years, whether it's the pattern of the seasons, pattern of the hunt,
or just a leopard in the trees,
what have you, you know, and teaching our children to recognize that pattern in the trees, what have you. So our tropes, the things that we follow societally, can easily eke into that. Even with dreams, things like that, we have to remember that we autonomically go through our day. Like 90% of our day, we are not making decisions. There's no executive decision making going on. You are coasting through your day and almost in a state of hypnosis, doing your job at work. How often do you actually pay attention to things while you're driving home from work?
Right. Oh, happens all the time.
Before you know,
we know you wrecked 6 vehicles.
Yeah. It's like, you know, like you get into a state of hypnosis, and it's so easy for us to do that, and it's so easy for those things to cross over. And we do have to be careful. Like we had the conversation on my show, Wolf, about the idea of how often are we, when we're going to do an investigation, bringing that energy with us already, you know? Because it's even you were saying, it's hard for you to tell your story of your encounter and not color it with people's stories of their encounter.
Yeah. Yeah, because at this point in time, I've heard so many other stories, and I keep getting asked the same question: was there a tail? Was there a tail? And then they asked me, what did it sound? Was there a sound? And I had to go back and ask my friend.
Was there black smoke?
Yeah.
Was there?
Yeah, I didn't see that. Yeah. And my friend's brother did. And so I went back and I actually, Tony and Anthony, I think were there when I talked to Daniel. And I asked him what he remembers about the sound. And he just remembers like a growl, kind of a low guttural, whatever. And he ran inside. And then later his dad talking about the weird black smoke that kind of was morphing into a dog. When he was kicking at it, it was making a whooshing sound. And I don't remember that. At least I don't think I did. But then when so many people start saying it, then it kind of gets into your psyche like, okay, maybe there was a growl. But then I think I do remember a growl. But then that part, and I don't remember a tail. And I've stuck by that. But it's like, since 1990, how many times have I heard a Dogman story? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Yeah. And
it's kind of like whenever you're listening to an EVP and somebody leads you.
Yeah.
And like, tell me if you hear this and this. And then they play it.
Yeah.
Like, you got to kind of be wary of that because now somebody has literally suggested to your mind.
That's right.
To listen for that. Not just, hey, listen to this and tell me if you hear anything.
And it's that pattern recognition. Again, it's like when you recognize something in the clouds, it's like you hear a noise and you're like, oh, that must be a word.
Even lawyers key in on that too whenever they look at film of I was watching one the other day of this teenager and the police were grilling him. And, for me now personally in my life, I've been on both sides. And I can tell you right now, I'd have very little patience for criminality at this point in my life because of my job. I mean, I'm just like, I'm sick of hearing, this door was broken and the TV was in my hand when I got here. Okay, dude, I'm not in the mood for that crap. I just have no patience for it at all. The beatings are going to commence regardless, okay? Yeah. And the police become your friend because it's, I just get really aggravated, So it's like, at this point, I'm not on that side at all. But I can understand, like, having been on both sides, and one of the things that really irks me is when someone starts giving you a story and then their friend starts adding to it at the same time, and then they kind of come up with it together. It's like, I can see you lying totally. Yeah. And then they're like, but then, and then I'm sitting here, like, looking at the footage going, like, really? Because I'm looking right at you do this. Literally, we were at what's that one called? Mosaic. Mm-hmm. I was sitting there with Zane, and we had this guy. We caught him. I mean, we had him in our little jail until the police came, And he goes, "That wasn't me, bro." I was like, "Dude, you had braids. We just saw you jump up and down on those pallets." He's like, "Wasn't me, bro." And I'm like, I'm looking right at you, dude. Like, look, a little right here. The shirt on there, literally, you're wearing like, Yeezys, whatever the heck it was. At the time, I said, "Dude, that's you, dude." And he goes, "It's not me." Like completely lying, totally lying about it. And he goes, "That's AI, bro. That's it's like." About a year ago when AI was just like still like, I'm like, really, dude? Somebody created that? He goes, it's on TikTok all the time, bro. Yeah. And I'm like, that's you. I said, I don't care what you say. I'm not going to argue with you. We had 3 people that witnessed you, and the police are going to come. And then this one lady comes. She's an African-American lady. It was funny as hell. And she sat up there, and she was like, "I'm going to tell you one more time before I'm going to smack you upside your head." And he goes, "You ain't my auntie. Don't be trying to talk." And she's like, "You think I'm playing?" Finally, he goes, "Okay, okay, it's me. All right. How dumb you got to be to ask the question over and over again?" I said, "Because we have to get you saying that it was you." Yeah. And now we got you saying it was you, and it's a done deal. Yeah. But the fact that he sat there for like an hour.
Oh, yeah.
And we were just like, dude, this is like so annoying. And then his friend was over there, wouldn't speak, wouldn't say anything. But every time he said it wasn't him, he'd snicker. And so when you're breaking it down, and whenever I talk to someone, and when I'm getting a story from someone, you'll hear somebody in the background go, "Oh, don't forget about this part," and then the person will go, "Oh yeah," and then there was this blue whatchamacallit, and I'm like, "Well, wait, hold on." I was like, "Did you witness that, or was it that person in the background? Because I need to talk to them." Yeah. And then you'll talk to them, and sometimes they'll be like, "Well, no, I didn't. They just told me that." Yeah. And I'm like, and all of a sudden they're forgetting that. So then you wonder what of it is suggestion and what part of it is actually, like it's actually happening.
Well, and, we really do have to be aware of that. Whenever you're looking at any phenomena. You have to. I mean, there is a science of phenomenology and how to go about testing such things.
Yeah.
You know, and how to put it up against blind study, how to put it up against peer-reviewed work, things like that. And that was one of the big things that the NASA panel was talking about. Was like, listen, you know, once again, like I belong to a lot of groups. I've been an audio video engineer for almost 30 years of my almost 50-year life. I've done a lot of recording. I've done a lot of editing. I've done a lot of camera work. There's an explanation for a lot of things that pop up on film, that pop up on one of the big things that they brought up in the NASA thing was the undependability of a cell phone picture.
Yeah. Yeah,
the actual undependability.
The lawyers can pick it apart. So
when you're talking about, because it's not an actual photograph.
Yeah,
it's not like a piece of film.
Yeah, yeah, you can't analyze it the same way.
Yeah, you can analyze it the same way, and it's interesting. You know, even the idea of ring video, even the idea of trail cams, like. You're talking about something where the memory is being written and rewritten, written, rewritten, written, rewritten, written, rewritten. Like, you will get ghosting. You're gonna get bits of data from. There was one like about 2 or 3 months ago that was making the rounds in all the paranormal groups about somebody who was they were out hunting and they were being followed by somebody on the trail cam. And it's like, if you look at the image, you can kind of make out the dude's hunting.
Yeah, I was going to say, outfit. Was it him?
Like,
was it him following him?
It was like, yeah, this is a ghost image. This is an image from like 6 weeks ago that got recorded over, and what you're seeing is a snippet, just a pixelated outline of that dude in the same spot. You know?
Yeah, I've seen that kind of thing with the ring. It's like a real faded image, and you're like, is that real? Then you're like, no, that's exactly what he wore a week ago.
Look at the weird stuff we're getting on trail cams, though.
Like,
there's some weird stuff.
There's some wild stuff, most definitely. Most definitely. But, you know, it's one of those, if you're getting footage in your backyard 4 or 5 times a month, why do you have a job? You should be selling tickets. Like, you're beyond that's normal now. That's normal now. That's no longer paranormal. If it's happening 3 or 4 times a month,
what about open up a theme park?
That's normal. Now the question is, when are you not getting one?
Exactly. We have a mutual friend who does a lot of investigating up in Oklahoma, once again, Oklahoma. And they were talking about someone who claims to see a Dogman and Bigfoot quite regularly. And I'll be honest, some of the pictures they sent me look kind of compelling. But then again, now with the advent of AI, there's no telling what the heck that is.
Sure.
And, you know, most of it was like, hey, the first few months I was getting these reports, it was this person saying they couldn't catch it on camera, which is very possible because the supernatural is very hard to video or to take pictures of. But then when we got the pictures, I'll say, me and my team, and I guess I speak for us, right? We all kind of looked at it and was like, oh, well, I don't know. I mean, it kind of looks like something, you know? But our mutual friend who has not made a judgment on it yet, I'm not going to say his name, but you probably know what I'm talking about. But he said, I'm not going to say anything about this until I can go up there and confirm it. And so he has yet to do that. And so I'm just kind of like, okay, well, I'm waiting to hear what you have to say about it, because he's of the opinion that, like you said, if Bigfoot is showing up in your backyard every other day, why are you not selling tickets to this thing?
Yeah.
But then he says, well,
because I want to protect it.
Yeah. He says, I don't want, they say that. And then he says, I'm not going to do that because then it won't show up. So it's like, I could turn invisible, but only when you're not looking.
You could put up an infrared day and night web camera,
which they did.
And charge a friggin' weekly fee.
Which Vault did. Vault, what's his name? Vault of Nightmares. He had the Dogman cams. It started with Dark Waters. And they did, and people were messaging me, bro, and saying like, did you see this? Did you see that on Dogman cams? Blah, blah, blah. You know, and I never even had time to look at that. And I'm like, I don't really look at that. I don't have time for that. because right now, the way it stands, and I'm not saying it's going to stay like this, but where we're at right now, and Jordan, you know this. I say Jordan because I know so many Christophers.
Right.
Like, so Garetano and then Jordan. So Jordan, you got to know this. I mean, it's not reliable. I can't use footage. I got a footage, straight up footage of what looks like a goat man at Estes Park, Colorado. And I'm like,
our mutual friend King Gerhardt says it regularly. We will not get the evidence from a photo or a video. Mm-hmm. That's not what's going to be our definitive evidence. That's not what's going to lead to proof. Mm-hmm. That's not what's going to lead to the scientific community going, well, now we have something.
Yeah, they don't care. Because now you can do anything with it.
Well, I mean, even people like Jeff Meldrum, stuff like that, like, hey, he's looking at hard evidence. They're looking at like oil alleles, things like that. They are looking at like forensic evidence, you know? A trail cam may lead them to a location possibly.
Yeah.
But are they going to consider that their evidence?
Yeah.
No, because like you said, a lawyer will pick that apart all day.
Easily.
And that's what we need. We need somebody to think like a lawyer, because if it ain't going to the real question is, and this is what I pose on my show regularly, would you want that to be your defense?
Yeah.
Would you want that evidence to be your evidence?
Exactly, yeah.
If you were sitting in court now.
If your freedom depends on that.
Yep.
And we interviewed Claudia Ackley on here, who actually, and I'm interviewing her for the Bigfoot book. She's one of my last interviewees I got to do. She's had some health problems, but she sued the state of California for the proof of Bigfoot, that it exists. But it's really weird. Now, you and I are very similar, and we've had a lot of conversations, and like I said, and I'm pretty sure we both kind of fall in the mid-level category. Like, there's two camps, flesh and blood and spiritual, and I'm of the opinion that there could be both.
Yes,
yeah,
I am as well, and it's the fact for me that whether we're talking, and this is all paranormal, because once again, I don't care if it's ghosts, Bigfoot, Dogman, elves, fairies, UFOs. They are all paranormal. They are all outside of the norm. So they should all evidentiarily be treated the same, and scientifically be treated the same, because there are cases where things fall outside of normal deviation.
Yep.
There is a 2 to 5% deviation of data that, I don't know, if I was paying somebody to build a wall, I wouldn't want 95% of a wall.
Yeah, exactly.
I'd want a whole wall.
And
I don't remember a chemistry teacher being like, so that 5% remainder you had in your equation, totally cool.
Yeah, it's fine.
Totally cool. All good.
You're only off in your math by 5, so you're fine.
Don't worry about that. Like, once again, would you want that deviation? You gotta,
And the thing is, too, for me, I feel like a lot of people that they don't want to explore all those other options, and then they instead box it all up. And we talked about this, I think, last week, where it's really the death of investigation is when you're boxing up only what you want, and then you throw away everything else. And if it doesn't fit in that box, then it doesn't matter. Like I said last week that I know I've talked to a couple researchers who told me that they were hunting one specific thing, and they have all this evidence of all this other stuff, but they don't have nothing of this.
That is not important.
It doesn't matter.
Data set.
Yeah, they don't publish it. They don't show it. They don't really care about it. They'll show it to, like, if you talk to them one-on-one.
Yep.
But they won't register as anything.
And it's interesting because my wife was just telling me, it was the same time that we were having the discussion a few weeks ago. She was telling me about a scientist she was listening to on a podcast where, quite literally, when they're doing studies, he was like, I was invited to come be part of a panel study, and we were told explicitly this study is for show. We are doing this study to basically get funding for more stuff, but we aren't really concerned about your result.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, did you just really gather a bunch of scientists and go, listen, you're here for namesake alone so that we can get some more money? And then he went on to talk about how people literally rig their information so that they get the results.
Studies don't,
They get the results that they're looking for.
Well, see, you just gave away our idea for our award show.
Well, thanks a lot.
We were going to do a Paranormal Roundtable award show.
I'm such a ruiner.
Yeah, and I just thought, you know what? We should probably win every category.
That's right.
Considering that we're going to host it and do the awards ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
And then I can go around telling everybody award-winning podcast.
That's
so,
right.
folks, right now, you've heard it from me.
Yep.
I am the best 40-in podcaster on the planet, and now I'm here to present this award. This is the prestigious Dogman Moroccan Award. Thank you, Tony, for presenting this award to me.
14 years straight. We've only been doing this for about 4 years, though.
66 years now. We've won this, and thank you. I appreciate this. I am now an award-winning podcast.
That's right.
That's it. That's all it takes.
It really is.
There goes the data. And we have several people in the room that have voted for this. Chris and you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And I would say coming in second would be Chris Realm.
Yeah.
You
I
were
came
close.
in a close second.
But I'll tell you what, we'll give you first for most innovative and thought-provoking. But for whatever
numbers.
He also won 2 awards. He also won best guest of today.
Best guest of the show.
That's right. Best guest of the week.
So now every week I'm going to introduce myself with award-winning, the Shogun of the paranormal. I'm going to come out wearing a mask like Bane.
A few years ago with Dudes and Beer, I actually won, the People's Choice Podcast Awards in the News and Politics category.
Wow.
Over Politico. Won over Politico. Not even joking.
I didn't know you were in the politic category.
Well, yeah, we had Dudes and Beer very much an open conversation. We had a lot of political conversation. We had a lot of conversation about
whatever you guys were into. Yeah.
Well, and sometimes like when the whole George Floyd thing happened, and Anonymous hacked the Minneapolis Police Department.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
They actively contacted me to use my platform. We had Anonymous on the show where I basically turned the airwaves over to them. I was like, you don't really grant interviews. So I'm going to ask you a couple things, but the microphone's yours, dude. So it was things like that kind of hit us there.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what I said forever. Was like, now I can unblur all those pictures on the internet and put award-winning on them. But I was like, I can always say from the award-winning producer of.
I think what we should do at the conference is present awards.
That might be fun.
That would be cool.
I mean, I'm going to be real honest right now, folks. It will be rigged. There is no. I'm like Venezuela. I'm just going to tell you the truth, right?
Yeah.
I'm just going to rig it. It's going to be.
Up.
You can vote all you want.
You can vote.
The votes are going straight in the trash.
Well, no.
I'm the man. That's it.
There's only 2 really people to vote for: PRT or Paranormal Roundtable. So you guys choose one of the 2. But
you do have an option.
Yeah, we do give you that choice.
A
because we care
douchebag or a
about
turd
that.
sandwich. That's
Mm-hmm.
your choice.
That's it.
Like South Park. It's like that's it. You're going to win.
Well, and that's basically been what we have gotten to deal with paranormal for years.
Yeah.
And
look at the shows that are being syndicated.
I was just having the conversation with my barber the other day. This is probably the first couple years where the holiday conversation around people's family tables were about paranormal and not politics.
Yeah.
Because families ain't talking about that anymore. That just ain't gonna happen.
That's when bad things happen. Yeah.
That's when fights happen.
But the conversation is open now. And it's really been interesting to see the windfall of things. Because like you were saying, the shows especially have opened a whole new realm and brought things to life. Things like Oak Island.
Oh, yeah.
Where there were a niche group of people that knew about. If you were a hardcore coast to coast listener, maybe you knew about some Oak Island.
They're actually finding some things,
dude. And that's what's been my thing in all of the Acorn communities. That's what the followers of Oak Island are, is Acorn heads. But yeah, there are so many people like, I'm so pissed. I've been watching for 10 years. They ain't gonna find no gold. I'm like, I guess you're missing all the actual history
that's not the point
and science that they're actively finding. Like things that are actually changing.
Something that's actually pertinent to the world.
Well, I mean, for me, the treasure is like kind of like the secondary point.
That's
It's
the
like
bonus,
the traps, the whole like the just the intricacy
Well, that's what Stephen
of
King was
everything.
trying to do with the Dark Tower. But I'm gonna be real honest. When I finished that, I was very mad. He's like, and in the end, the journey is like. I'm like,
The journey is the story.
F you, Stephen. All right, I'm done with it. I threw that book against the wall. I was like, what? All of that. These books were like the size of
like 4 fingers thick.
dude, I could have read all the Gnostic Gospels, and instead I'm reading this. And I don't read fiction, and I was conned into it. I'm not gonna lie, I wanted to read it, but anyway, I was mad. I want to blame somebody. Somebody's got to be responsible. But anyway, it was me. I threw it against the wall, and I'm like, this is crap. I've read so many big books and been like, at the end, you're kind of like, what did I just? Well, I mean, like Gone with the Wind. That was very satisfying. I liked it. But then I read, it. And it was good. There was a few Stephen King books, of course, Silver Bullet, but
Great one.
You're going back and the Night Flyer, but those aren't time consuming big books. I don't like fiction much. But then I go Dark Tower. Okay, I'm gonna do this, and it took me months because I had a lot, but I was on post working, and it sandwiched in between. I think the last 2 volumes or something like that. I was reading one of Barton's books. And that took my attention away from it. And then when I was done, I went back and I read the last 2, and I was mad. I was really mad. I was like, if I ever see this guy, I'm going to give him a piece of like he gives a crap. He's going to go, huh? What are you talking about? Because he's a weirdo, he's not going to give a crap. He's Stephen King, But I digress. The point, though, what we were talking about, and it's been something that's come up over and over again, and I really am. I'm starting to see this because I saw.
I'm in both camps. I
saw that.
I'm in the physical, and then the fact that there is something else, and there's something else that's been around for millennia. Written about in numerous cultures. I don't know if you want to call them Nephilim, demons, whatever. But they play by a different set of rules.
That's right.
And the funny thing is, we have very little to do with those rules. Pretty much the only rule is like what God gave the devil with Job. Like, all right, just don't kill him.
And there again, it's like that whole.
You do anything you want, just don't kill him.
And people have asked me the Job thing over and over again, and I've talked about it on the show, and I'll reiterate.
It's one of my favorites. I love it.
That book predates Genesis.
Yes,
and people don't understand it was written in Arabic, and people don't understand that when I tried arguing with somebody, went and try to argue. It's easy to argue. They just start arguing. I was actually at the jewelry counter, talking to my jeweler, and that's another place where you meet all kinds of at the mall, right?
Yeah.
You meet all the wise people there. He comes up with his staff and he's like, yes, okay, yeah. This is like Charlton Heston.
Okay, great traveler.
Yeah. He's like, you're wrong about that. Genesis and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But Gandalf, he comes up and he starts arguing with me, and he's an older guy, and I don't want to be rude. And he's like, I was a Bible theologian. And I'm thinking to myself, you may have been at one time and you lost your mind, or you're just full of crap. And maybe you just have a shopping cart out there that you sleep in. I don't know. But either way, I was like, this dude is not a Bible theologian, And when he's sitting here discussing the book of Job, and he's talking to 2 Muslims and a Christian, and then me being a Christian, and he was going off the rails, and I was just like, dude, it kind of reminded me of that scene in Life of Brian where he's like, and then, it takes the chew and blah, blah.
Yeah.
He's like one of the messiahs.
Follow the sandal.
Follow the sandal,
Follow the cord.
Yeah, what's annoying about that is
but he was
just because you're an expert doesn't mean you can be wrong.
Well, but he wasn't an expert, though.
Well, I mean, that's
everybody
what he was claiming
claims
to
they
be.
are.
Yeah, well, we do too, but
part of the problem, though, is the idea, and we live in a world of confirmation bias right now, and not only confirmation bias, but confirmation desire. We all have this innate want to belong, this innate want,
which creates tribalism.
Yeah. And, it's the root of so many things. It's the root of so many political issues in our country. It is literally what leads to the infrared, ultraviolet didactic, and everybody forgetting that there is white in the middle of that that's made of all of those colors.
People don't understand that either.
And
Explain the white made of all color.
Well, It's the idea of whether you're talking or whether you're looking at something, they're both vibration. There is a whole world outside. If you look at the actual physics of the spectrum of light, there is only a small section right in the middle, about an eighth of that spectrum, that we can see and hear.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it's visible light and audible. Because that's kind of where the whole idea of chakras and things like that come from. That every color is a vibration. Every color is a frequency.
And the mantis shrimp, for instance, can see I think it's 200 more colors than we can.
Yeah,
that's a wild thing to think about.
Oh well, you start looking at birds and stuff; they literally see into the ultraviolet range, and even partially into the magnetic range, which is why geese can direct into north.
Yeah, perfectly.
Why homing pigeons can. It's not just the ferrite in their nose; it's also the fact that they can partially see the magnetic grid of the Earth. It's how homing pigeons find their way home all the time. Things like that. They're actually following the magnetic lines of the Earth. It's wild. But we're sensitive to that. But how sensitive are we?
Yeah.
And when you start looking back, especially go back a generation and a half. Go back to our great-grandparents who farmed for a living. Stuff like that. They had a connection to the earth that we just do not have anymore. They didn't really have to look at a farmer's almanac to know, well, I should probably get those seeds in the ground now.
Yeah. Well, we were just talking about this, Christopher, night before last. We were talking about farming, and I was talking about how my grandparents and their whole generation, everyone had a garden.
Yeah.
Everyone had a garden, and I was kind of complaining because
victory gardens, dude. They all had a victory garden.
I loved tomatoes, but it was every time I went somewhere with my grandparents, somebody was giving us tomatoes.
Yeah.
And I was they had bags of tomatoes, and my grandmother would make all kinds. And in the South, we have this stuff called red-eyed gravy. I don't know if anybody knows what that is. And then fried green tomatoes. And I was getting so sick of tomatoes. Every time I went to one of these other people's houses, whether it was a great aunt, great uncle, or a great great aunt or great uncle, whatever, I ended up with tomatoes, and I'm like, "Here you go, young man, have some tomatoes." And I'm like, "Why is everybody growing tomatoes? What? And it's like a conspiracy."
We're in the perfect environment for it.
But yeah, and then everybody had preserves.
Oh yeah,
peach preserves, apricot preserves,
fig preserves, man.
Dude,
my grandmother's fig tree.
Oh
man, I miss that fig tree.
Yeah, and you're my age, I believe, right? How old are you?
Yeah, I'm 48.
Yeah, I'm 48 too. I'll be 48 in 2 weeks, 3 weeks.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so we're the same age. So we grew up the same. So you probably know who this guy is.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So we grew up that way. But I was a kid, and I just remember going out to my Uncle SD's, and I thought I'm gonna have to shuck peas, which is okay. I don't mind. Aunt Carmel would always say, and she'd be like, "Josh, you want to help me shuck these peas?" And I didn't care.
I used to live. That was one of the things that still to this day. A fond memory of mine was sitting and watching Looney Tunes, snapping peas with my grandfather.
Yeah.
Sitting there working peas in the morning.
Yeah. Yeah, every morning. And they got up at the crack of dawn or before the crack of dawn, and then I'd go out and feed the cows with them. And, my grandfather, he had a couple horses. We had a mule. And we had a donkey, and he had one named Anita, and then he had a dog named Juanita. And it was because only my grandfather would do this. And I would go out there and I would talk to the dog, who was a Doberman Pinscher, and her name was Juanita, and Anita the donkey would come running up. And then they didn't get along, so then he would be like, and then my grandfather, it's kind of funny, he would get on and he'd be like, "Why are you calling them together? You know they don't like each other." And I'm like, "Why would you name one Juanita and the other one Anita?" And he was like, "That's two different names." I'm like they know the difference, dude. It's
one's inside of the other.
Yeah, it sounds the same. So one's coming up and the other one's biting and the other one's kicking, and they didn't like each other. And my grandpa would accuse me of a conspiratorial, trying to make them fight or something,
Yeah.
And so what I didn't realize though is that donkey would eat everything in that garden. And so when I went out there to help my grandmother and I didn't close the fence, and the donkey, she was just grabbing ears of corn. She was grabbing, and my grandma was like, "Oh my gosh!"
Yeah.
And I was
just helping herself.
I didn't think anything of it. My grandpa, he taught me a valuable lesson about that. And he was like, "Look, He said, this is summertime. He goes, but we suffer in the winter when you do that because, they would take all these vegetables and they would put them in vinegar and salt and they would
Put it in the
preserve them. And they had a huge cellar. Yeah. Full of, they had an above ground cellar and it was just full of peach, just shelves.
Yeah.
And that's what they would eat all
Preserved
winter.
corn ready to go. Everything.
Beets. I mean, it was now you only hear about that with the Amish.
Well, that are hardcore preppers.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I still have quite a bit of it in my Cajun family. That was passed down quite a bit. I never learned the canning. I really wish I had.
Yeah, me too. I don't think our generation did.
Quite a bit of my cousins, that was passed down to them, all the making preserves, everything else. And
we were raised up on Safeway and H-E-B.
Yeah,
that's
nobody left my grandfather's house without a bag of groceries. It just didn't happen. And you probably got like a jug of frozen perch along with that, or some squirrel or something like that to take home with you and make a sauce or a gumbo. Yeah. And we had a different view of the world at that point, where there was a live and let live. We worried more about what our neighbor was doing with their crop. Things like that, because we gave them wood, they gave us meat.
That's right.
We depended on each other for our survival as a society.
The neighborhood,
if we're all just
everything.
growing corn, then we're just going to have corn.
Yeah.
So it's like, I'll grow
we
corn.
always had tomatoes, cucumbers, and we had okra, all that. And the neighbors are the Mexican family across the street. They grew like all these different types of peppers. Yeah. They grew all this stuff that we didn't have. They had a banana tree, and we would swap. Yeah,
that's where the farmers markets came from.
Yeah, my grandfather had a fig tree, he had a tangerine tree, like all that kind of stuff. And he had a pantry of things that you don't touch.
And then my grandpa would get so mad when I'd pick the green fruit.
You'd go in there. There would be big 5-gallon jugs of water. There would be some ammunition. Like that was the hurricane stash. That was the one that things
you
got
grew up in
rotated
Louisiana?
out. No, I grew up in Houston. And visiting him in East Houston.
Houston's basically Louisiana.
Louisiana Junior.
It's the doorway. Yeah. That's the east.
Spent a lot of time in Channelview and grew up in Crosby.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah. Houston, if you're not familiar with Texas, Houston could not be more different than West Texas.
Oh yeah.
Even in football, you have Marshall and all these different schools, and you had Odessa Permian, and then you had Bay City. The Bay City Black Hats. They were all really good teams, and it was like East Texas and West Texas have this big rivalry. You would think it'd be North and South, but it's not. It's East and West. West Texas has its own, out there in San Angelo, and they're like, we got the best football. And then East Texas is like, no, we got the best football, Stephenville and all these teams. It's crazy, though, because each area of Texas, though, has its own special brand of cryptid, too.
Yes.
Yeah, and when you go out to West Texas, I hardly get any stories of these hyena-type creatures in the big thicket, which I think it's odd because you get them in Louisiana. But I never get them in East Texas. I get them out in West Texas.
Yeah, like Nacogdoches, things like that.
Yeah, why is that? I mean, what's going on there? The Permian Basin, you get a lot of them. Is it because maybe they come up out of the ground? Or?
Yeah, no idea. It is a strange thing because, like you said, you could start looking at Louisiana and there's plenty of sightings, stuff like that. And there's right up, of course, Jefferson, Texas, Bigfoot capital of Texas, all that. Yeah. Right up there in that 4 Points region, there are quite a few.
Man, Arkansas is full of them, too.
But as you go down, down around the I-10 area, there's some stuff, I guess, like Sam Houston National Forest, stuff like that. But the rest of it, there really isn't a whole lot. Yeah. It's really strange.
The Dogman reports, I know the Palmetto State Park in San Antonio supposedly has what people they deem as an invisible Bigfoot. Now, I wondered about that because I was talking to somebody who gave me a report of that his girlfriend's family had an encounter. So I actually looked into that. And there are reports of it's the smallest park in Texas, state park.
Yep.
And so I looked into that, and actually there is several sightings. And the only thing I could come up with Bigfoot-like was somebody seeing one of these blurry outline looking, like the cloaking.
Yeah.
And they saw a cloaked creature that looked like a Bigfoot. But here's the weird thing, and this was a woman who saw one in 1992. I thought it was weird. I went back and I looked, and I want to say it was Albert Rosales. I can go back and I need to talk to Albert anyway about a bunch of other cases. But I looked into it, and I remember looking it up. It was either him or Redfern. You know, them two both have done so much work on the humanoids. And I was reading it. So then I got back with this person, and I said, I believe that case, that there was one that precipitated it. That was and so I subsequently, since then, there's been multiple cases of these shimmering phantom-looking creatures. But one guy in particular was attacked, like he was shoved from behind.
Oh, wow.
But I think it's weird because he said there was a rotten egg smell, and that like it coincided everything with Bigfoot, how loud the footfall were. But then when you start looking at that area right outside of San Antonio, all along the corridor between San Antonio and Houston, you get a smattering of UFO reports. Yeah. And then when you get those reports going more toward Houston from I-10, like going into Katy.
Yep.
Like that whole stretch right there, I guess it's like, is it Sealy? Sealy?
Yeah.
You start running into this weird smattering of black cat reports.
Yeah.
Yeah. And not just a black cat, but things standing on their hind legs.
Yeah.
And I had one lady right outside of Sealy. She says, let me tell you something. You know, she's like, and in LaGrange, I got one near LaGrange. And she said, these things come out of UFOs. Like she was very adamant about it. So I interviewed her. I was going to put her in the book.
Sure.
And she's like, well, you have to put down that it came from a UFO. And I was like, I said, did it come from a UFO? And she's like, I believe it did. I said, did you see it come from a UFO?
Did you see the UFO
Yeah, exactly.
land and this thing come out?
No.
Yeah, that's a very important part of the story. So,
yeah. Her great aunt, she goes, I was in the root cellar with my great aunt, and we had the pickled beets, and I looked up, and there it was. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I'm just throwing that in there, folks. It's very important to do that. But she was like very convinced. And then she got her great aunt on the phone, and then it became one of these. And I'm not bagging on you, ma'am. I don't think that I'm going to tell that story in a different light. I'm not going to put it in the book because I believe it stands on its own. But she got her great aunt on there, who I believe was kind of just going along with the kind of, you know, and I believe she saw something, but I believe that she was so determined to make me believe it, which it's not like you have to prove it to me. I'm not the police. Yeah. But her great aunt was just kind of like,
pouring it on.
And then when she wandered off to go do whatever it was with one of her kids, the great aunt confided in me that she had been seeing UFOs since she was in 7th grade.
Oh, wow.
And she was like, I was in grade school. I was like, you know, when I was at middle school. And
we have a huge number of case sightings in Texas when it comes to UFOs.
It's a big state. A lot of them, though.
Yeah. I mean, to the point that we're one of the, I want to say either top 3 or 4 with MUFON reports across the globe. I mean, we have a lot of military bases. We have
the largest in North America, actually.
Yeah,
Killeen, which isn't far from here.
Yeah,
what is it, about an hour and a half from here?
Something like that.
That's about it.
Yeah. And even the whole Cash Landrum case was one that they basically believed that it was a ARV, alien reproduction vehicle, that was going awry, and had military choppers escorting it and all kinds of things. You know, that was one of them that there were people actively injured, like they had radiation burns, things like that, and that actively happened right down the road from my grandmother's house in Kennefic, where, like, yeah.
How did you get involved with MUFON and the whole UFO connection with the community?
My connection with MUFON happened just actually a couple years ago. I got to the point, I guess, where I've decided to start supporting communities in different ways, Wolf. I'm at the point in my life where I have some opportunities, and I guess now I'm to the point where I can actively vote with my money. You know, events like yours are important. Events like Texas UFO Con are important. They are where people of like mind get to come together and get to share these stories unabashed and unashamedly. And that is important for the
Not
conversation.
being judged. You
Yeah.
know?
One podcast as well. I mean,
Oh, absolutely.
I think that's definitely one thing that's
Yeah.
Well, you know,
stepped it forward into being more in the open is that we're able to have people just talk about it
Yeah.
and then people can come in.
Yep.
So
when you look at guys like us, and then Christopher, you, and then you look at like Garitano, Tony Merkel,
Yeah.
and you know, Josh Inocchio, a lot of my friends that are doing this, Bettina Moss, Jessica, DA, all these people that are doing these shows, you're starting to see hybridization. Like, whereas before there were people that were like, I am a quote unquote Bigfoot show.
Yeah.
That is what I do. And they throw everything out the window that's not Bigfoot related. And I understand that because they're a Bigfoot show. Like, think Wes Germer, you know, he does his deal, you know. And I understand that. I can respect that. And then you got shows where they focus on the UFO phenomena. I talked to a guy the other day who wanted to try to proselytize me about how everything is an alien. And I don't want to say his name. People probably go over there and give him a hard time because he was kind of giving me a hard time. And I was like, look, dude, because I wasn't agreeing, you know, 100%. And I said, look, man, if you want to collaborate, let's collaborate, but I'm not going to get on my show or your show and tell a lie that something I don't believe in.
Yeah.
And he says, well, why is that? Everything really is alien. And I understand by his definition is my definition, same thing. It's like we did with the paranormal thing, you know, the true definition of alien is anything that's not of this, you know, whatever is alien. By that definition, angels and demons and everything else are aliens.
Sure.
But are they flying around in spaceship aliens? That's the question. And he was of the... Absolutely, he believes that.
And are the spaceships even aliens?
You know, think of the bigger think question. Of the Yuzon Vong in Star Wars, where everything was biological.
Yeah,
yeah.
Well,
it's really weird.
Well, I mean, even the case of one of the big discussions going on in the community of researchers is. Are they from another planet? Does it have to be from another planet? Or could it just be a dimensional shift due to vibration?
And either way, they could be from another planet.
And exactly. It's exactly what I say. Either way, still extraterrestrial, not of this Earth. But maybe from an alternate Earth. Great. I think still not of this Earth.
There has to be a way to differentiate that, though, because if you don't, then you have these issues where, like, you have genuine UFO attacks or genuine UFO encounters, and then you have dimensional encounters.
Yeah,
we could totally go there.
But then once you start blending the two, you're never really going to figure out what's what and what's going on.
That is one of the points that I've been bringing up on numerous shows whenever I guest, and even in numerous conversations with people privately, is that, once again, I fully believe that there is a physical phenomenon to all of this. But I also believe that there is a spiritual vibrational component, no different than if you've had a really, really crappy day and your girlfriend broke up with you and everything else, and then you walk into a room of buddies. Like, if they're your really good friends, they can tell something's off. They can feel that vibrational shift when you walk in.
And also just you being there also might change your energy too.
And you gotta be careful whenever you're going out with the intent. It's kind of like a scientist that is intent on getting this data out of their experiment. Are they blind to the other things that are happening because they are so myopically focused on this? And the issue that you have, and I'm not saying that the two paranormal things cannot coexist. I'm not saying that one doesn't is not maybe the causality of the other. However, you come across the phenomenology of, like you just said, which one do we start investigating first now? The Bigfoot or the portal? Because I'm not saying that either one cannot mutually exist, but now you have commingled the two, and which para do you start from? Which phenomenon do you start proving first?
I think that's why it's important to have experts in various fields willing to work together, though. That's the thing.
That's what brings it all together. That's what's so important is that Christopher Jordan, folks, you know, he's here in the studio, and I thought it was important to have you come to the studio because, you know, what we talk about, we'd like you to be privy to, you know, because we have these conversations, and I thought, what better way to, you know, than to bring you in and we just talk shop
Absolutely.
like we normally do with all of our friends. And,
well, without the hypothesis, you don't get to a theorem.
yeah.
And without experimentation, you can't prove a theorem. That is science. Like, that's the scientific method. And I think that is finally the point that scientists are ready for. And you know, like they said in the NASA panel, it's been on the fringe for so long because people are afraid to publicly research it. They are afraid to be ridiculed. They are afraid to lose letters behind their names. They are afraid to lose funding for other projects, which keep their lights on and keep their babies
Which is
fed.
crazy. It's like you have to remain ignorant, you know?
Well, like I said, I don't know a chemistry professor that would let me pass with a 5% remainder in an equation. Where it's like, well, what happened to this? Did it go to solution? Did it go to residue? Did it off gas? What happened to the remaining 5%? Because you've only got 95% of that solution accounted for. I would not have passed that answer. I would have failed it on the test because there's a 5% no.
Well, you would fail depending on who your parents were too.
Yeah.
And what school you're at.
Well, oh yeah.
I knew some people back in the day that were getting passed for donations.
And you know, it's one of those that we have to be willing to look at it, and that's what they've finally come out and said is that we are doing the disservice by not looking into it. By not looking into it, we are not being scientists.
Yeah, and it's also kind of just disingenuous to kind of be like, hey, all this is correct and like this is all something that we're willing to accept. But as soon as you stray from that, you're not only are you ridiculed, you're also taking everything away from you, all your accomplishments, everything that you built up to that
throw
point.
Throw it in the trash.
Just
because
throw it away.
You're a nut job.
Because you're willing to accept all these other people. Like there's millions of witnesses all around the world.
Yeah.
You're just going to say that they're all wrong? That they're all just insane, they're all crazy, they're all just don't see stuff.
And that's the thing is that and that's what the head of Arrow said. It was that we have a 2 to 5% anomaly. Even out of witness statements, things like that, we have a 2 to 5% ratio that we cannot explain by airline traffic, astronomy, phenomenon in the sky, sprites, you know, things like that. Strange plasmas that we know about. Even heat inversions. Like I've got a whole theory about the Marfa lights.
Which could be caused by heat inversion. Yeah, and that happened in Georgetown a couple days ago. For what, 4 days ago?
Yes.
A raise in 17 degrees.
Heat and temperature inversion, because
burst.
You're talking about
Heat
somewhere
burst.
that it's 100-something degrees outside during the day, then it's going to drop to about 70 degrees at night. So that is a massive,
it's the desert,
that's a massive lensing that can happen. And what a lot of people don't realize is that there are actual phosphorescent rocks out in the hills of Marfa that actively store UV and glow after the UV disappears. Like I could bring some into studio next time. It's pretty wild. And after I found that out, because I'm a rocks and minerals fiend, and after I found that out, I was like, oh my God, what if these rocks are literally absorbing the UV all day? And then at night, the temperature inversion happens and you see the pocket of it now moving across the horizon. The glowing pocket of the actual mineral.
That's one theory, but let me throw this at you. I mean, that makes a lot of sense because that's something that I've thought about too. Is like, you know, a lot of times they're seen at dusk, when at a particular time, and they're seen at times of the year that would cause that. Because my grandfather used to live out in Marfa, but here, think about this. Longitudinally, that sounds so ridiculous. But if you look at it's the latitude, right? Latitude wise, it corresponds with Saratogalites.
Yeah.
The Saratogalites, if you look at the latitude, it actually corresponds with that. So how do you explain that? Because that's in East Texas. That's in the big thicket.
Yeah.
And Marfa's out in the high desert. So what I mean,
once again, there you could be talking about different type of phenomenon. You know,
like two different things showing similar instances.
And once again, even if you're talking something along the lines, because you'll run across the same kind of temperature inversions over water, things like that. It's where you end up with a lot of the island mirages that you see, where it looks like a ship is just like floating in the air, that kind of stuff. And yeah, if you're talking about something along the lines of St. Elmo's fire, something like that, that is being lensed by that atmospheric phenomenon, sure, absolutely, you could definitely get the same kind of thing, because when you're talking about especially East Texas thicket, things like that, there are a lot of pockets of natural methane, a lot of things like that out there. So once you're talking swampy area, things like that, you get into a different realm of phenomena that can occur naturally. Yep. With that kind of, and I'm not trying to go, swamp gas is the answer. Don't get me wrong. But
not to mention,
there are numerous natural phenomena that can cause those things.
But my thing though is that if you look at the Saratoga lights, they line up latitudinally with the,
and that's the case with a lot of phenomenon. That's the case with a lot of.
Would that be the same? Would they have the same? Because how far are the Saratoga lights? Look it up, Marfa, Texas.
Marfa to Saratoga.
Like so. If you look at those lights, like. Would the geo, like, how do I say it? Like, would that play a factor? Would it have the same?
Sure. It absolutely could, especially if you're talking about ley lines, that kind of stuff. The idea of energies following along a grid in the earth. Yeah, two things being along the same pattern or along the same line can absolutely carry that energy across it.
Yeah.
It says 10 hours away from
10 hours. They're 10 hours away.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's like 600 miles. Okay, across Texas. So but yet they line up.
Yeah.
On ley lines. And somebody said here in the chat about Monkey Boy. He says, O'Fannin crafts can be angels themselves. KD7 says they're in the unseen spectrum of this planet realm. And we were talking about how things aren't seen by the naked eye.
Yeah.
What's really funny is when someone says, well, I believe what I can see. My friend's dad used to say that all the time. And I'm like, you're not, even as a kid, I was going
about 80-90% of the world you can't see, guys.
We're not seeing it because and it says in multiple holy books that we can't see these entities, but they can see us. Yeah, like in the Quran, it says that they exist a right angle from right angle. And of course, they were pretty good in math. We use Arabic numerals.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they would have understood that. And so, when you, like Anthony poked a hole in a pen and moved it up and down and said, look, this is how, it works here. He was trying to explain it. It's very weird when, to explain it, but it does make a lot of sense. And when people talk about, and of course, in the Latino culture, we're taught about brujeria. It's always like, oh, brujeria. It's magic. It's magic, brujeria negra, But what I always tell people is that it's not black magic, it's black science. It's something that we haven't caught up with. I had Rick Atchestein here in the studio weekend before last, right? We had Max Hawthorne on last week. So weekend before last, Rick was in the studio. And Rick, he doesn't call himself a demonologist, but I call him that because he's real versed in all that. And we were talking about the legalities of exorcisms and things like that.
Sure.
And to the untrained observer, you would look at this and say, okay, this is magic.
The question, just to loop that right back to where we were a minute ago, the question is, walking into a place, are you just already giving your consent?
Yeah. Yeah, because you're going...
You're by default giving your consent. I don't know if you've seen Renfield.
Yeah.
But my favorite scene in that was the welcome mat.
Yep.
Yeah.
Where he walks in and Dracula's just chilling, drinking wine, and he's like, "Oh hey," and he's like, "Oh shit," because
he knew.
Dude, you put a welcome mat there. You invited the vampire in.
Yep. It's like
like you broke the rule.
You broke the rule. I mean, and
yes, going with that energy of I am inviting this. I am looking for this. You are by default giving that consent. So
because they technically they bed down
dude,
in a place.
I'm not gonna lie. Like, I got a buddy of mine that laser burns stuff, and I honestly was halfway done designing a Curious Realm answer board. It's halfway done when I stopped myself, and I was like,
answer board is a fancy word for Ouija board.
Yeah. I mean, it was a pendulum board. But
You're still messing with that.
But yeah,
why would you test it?
It's still one of those, like, I'm inviting the uninitiate to maybe tinker with something that they shouldn't tinker with. Now, don't get me wrong. I know many adepts, things like that. And it goes much more than just putting a white chalk circle on the ground or a white salt circle, folks. That does nothing.
Well,
nothing.
Here's the thing: is like you're playing chess when you don't even have the right pieces.
That's
it's
right.
Like
Exactly.
You're just messing around.
They are playing by a different set of rules, man. A totally different set of rules.
And they can lie to you and tell you what their rules are.
They trick you so easily. Let me give you a quick story about that.
Please.
We were talking about that. Speaking of Marfa, this one came right outside of not Alpine, Fort Davis. You know where Balmaria is?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so I had some friends that went to Balmaria. My friend Jace used to play football at San Angelo years ago. And he said, dude, we took a road trip. We went to Balmaria. And they started playing with what you're talking. Explain to people what the pendulum board is very quickly so they can understand.
Sure. Pendulum is basically a means of divination, kind of like using dowsing rods. You're using it in a yes-no fashion. It's going to move one way for yes, one way for no, maybe in a circle, maybe the opposite
Oh, is it
direction.
the one where you hold something?
Yeah,
okay.
where you're holding like a plumb line, basically, and it's going to move.
Yeah, I've seen those before.
And I've gotten some amazing results.
I've seen it happen.
Pendulums. And I mean like pendulums that are just hanging there, not like somebody's holding it. Like it's in a unit that's hanging on its own.
And it'll move on its own. It is freaky, dude.
It's wild, man.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was looking at making just a little Curious Realm answer board, but it was
just a little Satanism.
just a little dabbling,
a couple devils,
smattering, just a smattering.
I'm just gonna give him a little phone call and hang up real quick. You know?
Yeah. I'm just gonna jerky boy the devil.
Like, do you have a refrigerator? They're like, no, I'm in hell. Like, no, that's pretty much the end of the joke.
Is your pitchfork running?
I'm behind you. Yes.
Yeah.
What's crazy though is when you look at this case that I got. Okay, he says, dude, he goes, this is some crazy stuff. Now, there's a friend of mine he got in some trouble with the law, and he did some time, like some serious hard time.
Okay.
And when he got out of jail, he was working with my brother at this one place. And I hadn't seen him in years. I started talking to him, and he said, dude, he goes, nothing was ever, there was two things that happened to him. One, when he was with me, we saw these black dogs with this guy that looked like he was being puppeted. I'll never forget that. I was 17 years old, and I believe that was my encounter with the black dogs. And I believe that they're different than the hombre lobo, but I believe they're connected. Okay. I believe they can go back and forth. I think there's different forms. And I've talked about that on Hellhounds, Black Hellhounds of Taylor, Texas. Go look at that episode, whatever. But then he said, dude, that was the first scariest thing. The second scariest thing, he said, was we were in Balmaria, and we rented a little spot there. And he goes, and the girl that I was with, she said, hey, let's go to Balmaria Springs. It's a beautiful place, right? And it was cool. And they went out to McDonald Observatory. They looked through the telescopes, which is it's wonderful. It's one of the darkest spots in North America. So that's why they chose that spot. I went there as a kid, and Mandela effect. I remember there being a planetarium there. Apparently there's not, and there never has been, but I remember that, which is weird. But anyway, long story short, he was talking about this. He said that the girl that he was with, her best friend was a witch, but not like in the way that she goes and collects herbs and spices and 11 herbs and spices.
Yeah, out wild crafting.
No,
things.
she's not doing that. She was a satanic
like
witch.
bruja.
Yeah, she was a bruja, and she went and she said, hey, do you want to see the devil? And my friend Jason and his buddy, they were like, no, not particularly, no. He says, so we go out to the pool. It was like a swimming pool at the little thing that they were at, or whatever, because the springs closed at a certain time. And we're sitting out there, and we're talking whatever at this little hotel where they were at. The springs were closed, and he said we were sitting there talking, and we hear that with this screaming coming. There was three couples. and 2 little cabin, whatever. And he went back inside of one of them and found this woman on the bed having what looked like a seizure, which would have been his friend's girlfriend. And she was freaking out and having a seizure. And the other girl, eyes were rolled back in her head. And he goes, dude, she came off the ground probably about 3 or 4 inches.
Wow.
And like, it was crazy. He said she was like kind of floating. But I may have told this story before, but he goes, right there on the floor was the wispy outlines of what I guess she had used, like some sort of limestone to create a pentagram.
Mm.
Well, these creatures that you summon, they don't give a crap about your pentagram because they go, oh, well, as long as you do that, they will stay within that pentagram.
No.
Bull crap.
No.
That is not what happens at all.
What happens, and I mean, we were talking earlier today about our libraries, and one of mine, I'm not going to lie, world religion and the occult has been an obsession of mine since junior high. I have a book that I used to check out from the public library regularly, Amulets and Talismans, and the library card in it is pretty much my name.
Yeah, over and over again.
So I go over and over and over again, like every other month, checking this book out for years. But we forget the fact that there is another world, and like we said, it doesn't play by our rules. What that is, whenever you're talking about Solomonic magic, Keys of Solomon, things like that,
Song of Solomon,
those keys that you draw on the ground that you carry with you, if you go back and read those ceremonies, if you go back and read that, there are weeks of fasting while you were making that mandala on the ground.
Yeah.
You didn't make it in like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
It was a spiritual cleansing of your same way as a Buddhist monk making a mandala on the ground where 5 of them are making it for days and days and days.
And it's always temporary.
Focus
too.
that energy. That's just it. Like, you are going through a state of spiritual cleansing before that rite, before that ritual. You aren't just deciding to do it.
I think people think like, I think when they think like, oh, I'm going to get in contact with demons, like they're like entering another physical world.
Like Buffy the Vampire Slayer or some crap, you know? Or
It's
like what was the one with the witches, the 3 witches or whatever?
Yeah, The Craft?
Is that what it was? It came on after Buffy?
No, it was Charmed. You're thinking of Charmed.
Charmed, yeah.
They think that it's some kind
was
of...
The Craft on TV.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah. It was actually 5-minute crafts, folks. Don't do it. It's terrible.
I like Charmed. It was a fun show.
It used to come on after Buffy. I remember. I actually was a Buffy fan.
Buffy was fun.
Well, I had 3 sisters, so they loved Charmed.
Yeah.
And I was...
Well, I ended up having to watch that crap too.
Well, you know, and even right now, my wife came to me the other day, and yesterday, as a matter of fact, and asked me if I had been having conversations with my son about God.
Yeah.
And granted, you know, like I shared in the episode that you were on with me, I'm a former seminary student. I was a youth minister for many, many years. I am still in touch with my God every day. Do I step into a church on Sundays? No, not really. But I talked to my son about it. And I was like, yeah, you know, whenever he's asked questions, because he's asked a few things. There have been a couple times here lately where he's talked about the land of the dead. And it's like, hey, if we need to hold off on the Coco for a little while, my man. Because like that was one of his favorite movies for a long, long time. And just here recently, like we had this little situation at day camp where he was, and granted, it was like a theater camp. So you're taking a kid with a very, very active imagination and telling him, go play pretend.
Yeah.
But he was trying to jump through a window to go to the land of the dead.
Oh, no.
And I was like, Bub, if we got to hold off on Coco for a little while and have this conversation, we will. You know, because that's a safety thing, my man.
How old is he?
He just turned 6.
Okay.
So still very young.
I talked about this on my show a couple of weeks ago. I thought I could fly.
Yeah.
And I tried to jump off of it, and my dad told me to close my eyes, and he had pulled the trampoline, the neighbor's trampoline over, and then he said, if you really believe you can, jump, and I did, and I just bounced.
Yeah.
Because my dad was smart enough to move the trampoline.
Yeah.
Yeah. He goes, if that trampoline was there, you broke your legs.
Yeah.
Or worse. Yeah, and so, but you're a child. You think anything's possible.
Yeah,
sure. And he's had friends he talks to. They aren't there. I don't discourage that. I'll ask him about it.
Do you think they're not there, or do you think it could be something else?
Well, I definitely think that all of us, every one of us, we are vibrational beings by nature. There is an energy inside of us that exists that cannot be destroyed. That is just physics. Energy can only change form. It cannot be destroyed.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct.
That's what I think I was speaking about earlier, about how people don't understand the difference between the spiritual realm and then the physical realm, and that they think that they're bound by the same limitations that we are. We aren't.
Or that you have to believe.
Yeah.
That you have to believe in the afterlife for that to be a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a big change in my life, because I remember probably about the second or third incidents I had of seeing a shadow person. I woke up in the middle of a night terror. There was a shadow person at the end of my bed, and it was physically grabbing me. I took that to my spiritual director, and he was like, "We don't really have a teaching on that, Chris." I'm like, well, I find that funny, because we have a definite teaching on heaven, on hell, on the soul. We have a definite teaching. You're telling people all the time that there is this dark thing that is lurking for our soul around every corner. But for some reason, when this dark thing reaches out and grabs me,
for your soul,
we don't have a teaching on that, Chris. And that for me was a leap of logic. And I remember literally telling him, "Padre, you're asking me to believe with spectral evidence, but when offered evidence of the spectral, you won't believe." Mm-hmm. You're asking me to make the leap of faith unconditionally. And my belief in my God, all of that is totally unconditional. Absolutely. I have my experiences, and that's why I court the guests that I court and have the guests that I have on, because you may find their experience unbelievable. Mine was pretty unbelievable too. Mm-hmm. I don't know of anybody else in that church that felt and heard God speak to them that day. Mm-hmm. I don't know any of them. And there were hundreds and hundreds of people in the church when I felt and heard God call me to serve. And it was strange going to what I considered to be a group of like-minded individuals. And when I shared that, it's like, okay, dude.
I think it's a similar problem with cryptids, is where people box things together, where they box in science, they box in religion, they box in spirituality, when it should be a melding of all three to figure out what's really going on. And I feel like science today has really become more about finding out exactly what something is, instead of what it used to be was finding out what was new. Finding out what we don't know. Instead, it's like, I want to prove what I know is 100% correct and be stand on that, instead of being like, it's okay to be wrong as long as you're searching for a new frontier.
Well, it's kind of like the word skeptic gets a really bad name in our communities. It really does.
Well, some skeptics are real douchebags.
Unfortunately, yes. A lot of people who claim to be skeptical,
just trolls,
are nothing more than trolls. But sadly enough, we have plenty of those in our communities as well. I mean, the whole NASA panel started off with the head of the panel and then the person after him coming up and talking about how they were literally threatened in emails and on social media by people, and it's like, that doesn't make a scientist want to get involved.
Yeah.
Like, you're railing against them and saying you're hiding something, you're hiding something, you're hiding something. And when they're trying to have the meeting and talk about it and actually bring science into it and bring NASA into the conversation, you're belittling them and telling them that they are liars and that you don't believe them. Then why should we do the work anyway?
What do you think?
If we're liars and you don't believe us,
but do you think
then why should we do the work?
Do you think NASA is hiding anything? I mean,
I think that it doesn't matter where you are, doesn't matter what it is. There will always be a cadre and a cabal of people who have an agenda. There will always be a cadre and cabal of people. Like, a lot of people forget the fact that, yes, it's a civilian space agency. I challenge you to find a civilian pilot in it.
Mm-hmm.
Every one of those dudes is a colonel, something like that in the Air Force.
And what does NASA stand for?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when you start getting down to it,
I'm a kid of the 80s. That's a cruel joke.
You could easily like, I mean, if you go down the rabbit hole,
yes,
you could say
there have definitely been some things there. And do they touch up a lot of work? Yes, they do.
Absolutely.
Most definitely.
They've had a lot of astronauts who've claimed to have seen things too.
They definitely do. They definitely do. And what's interesting is they've never stopped a single one of them from saying anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
Never once, not a single one.
Well,
there was one of the twins who did the whole ISS experiment was on the panel, and when because at the end of the panel, I encourage everybody to go watch that. It's 4 hours long. But A, you will get some amazing data out of it. B, you will get some great evidentiary process and what the actual process for looking at and filtering this data is. But also at the end, you literally hear them answer a lot of friggin' hard questions. Like, they pulled no punches with the questions on themselves that came from viewers.
That's what we want.
It was great. Yeah. Like, they answered questions like, does NASA have a protocol for telling astronauts not to say anything if they see something in outer space? And you literally hear the astronaut in the back like, nope. Like, nope, they sure don't. Like, they never sat me down and said, you see something, you're not going to say this. Like, never happened.
They always say that it's space junk, too.
Sure.
That seems to be a big one. They just like, everything is space junk.
Ice crystals is another big one for the cameras up there. And there are definitely, once again, amongst the hundreds of STS videos, there are a good 2 to 5% of them that they will put their hands up and go, I don't know, man. Mm-hmm. I don't know. That one's weird. Like the prime one is the one where the object is floating along, and then you see it like, whoo, do the juke move, and you see the object like fly past it, like they were trying to hit it with a missile, and it saw it coming and like, boo, zooms off. That's still one that they're like, I don't know. That one's strange. That one's really weird. But there is a lot that is explainable by regular means. Cameras do strange things. Camera sensors do really strange things. They really do, especially with light aberrations, light coming in from oblique angles to things. You get some wild ghosting in images.
I think it's a little bit bad on both ends. Like, some people are a little bit too suspicious of everything, and then some people are a little bit too like, yeah, that's definitely this.
Yeah, and
it's like definitely people who shouldn't have a say in that have too much of a say in it. Where like I think like people hear a couple podcasts and they think themselves as experts about something, and it's like, well, hold on. Have you been studying this? Have you gone out and done the research? Or have you just been reading a couple books? And if that's what you've done, then can you really say you know?
Actually read books. That's
not true.
That's a victory nowadays.
Reading is good.
People don't like to read.
Well, the thing is, though, and you can probably attest to this because, once again, you're right at my age. We were at the age, Wolf, where when we wanted to know something deep, we rode our bike to the library.
Yep, that's right.
And if that library didn't have it, we asked our librarian which one locally did. And then we had to go find it. We don't have that issue anymore. We once used to get, like, you got to imagine your brain like a really big sieve that is filtering information. And the world is like a gutter coming into your brain. The problem is, the gutter's gotten a whole lot wider. It's now like the size of the roof.
Oh, it's literally just in your face.
There is so much. There comes a point where even if it's just water coming into the sieve, and no material,
Mm-hmm.
there's so much water that the sieve is overflowing.
Yeah.
And that's where we're at.
And
We
you're
are at an information clog.
Yeah.
And not only is there so much information, and so much data out there, it's data overload.
Mm-hmm.
And when you marry that with
It gives me anxiety.
when you marry it with confirmation bias, when you marry it with the almost religion, not only of science, but of the believer, because believe me, I am a heart and soul believer.
Mm.
But I've got to be critical.
Mm-hmm.
I've got to be critical. I've got to filter the information. I can't just accept everything prima facie.
Yeah.
I will accept everybody's experience and everybody's story prima facie all day, because I ask people to accept mine prima facie. I can't prove the existence of God, much less the experiences I've had with him.
Because of your experience.
Because they're my experience.
That's why we always try to preface with every story we say is like, try to believe what you can. Like, believe it as you will. Like, we're telling it to you because this is how we received it.
That's right.
But don't take it as gospel. Don't think like, and we've had that issue where people will come to Wolf and be like, you said this and this and this and this story, and it just sounds absolutely bogus. And it's like, it might sound bogus to me too, but this was the story I was given.
Yeah.
And I will give you
I'm
that
not
exact
church
story.
it up so it sounds better, because there was this one, it was the one with and she's probably, I think she's going to be in the book, where she was talking about it had clothes or whatever. And and I got lambasted in a group for that. And I said, dude, why would you? Well, because that's her personal experience.
Yeah, that was the experience.
and
I
if you
was
put it out
told.
there, and it's like, and it was, I heard that on another show. Oh, that's another one that I get attacked for, because it's like, I don't own these stories, dude. You know what I mean? Like I heard of a couple podcasts.
Believe it or not, many researchers will hear that. Here's a prime example. I heard Kathleen Martin comes on my show. She's the niece of Betty and Barney Hill.
Yeah. I think she is.
One of the founders of the Experiencer resource team with MUFON, actively going out and talking with not just witnesses, but experiencers, people who say that they have been abducted, things like that. Very special realm of work, amazing woman. But she told the story on my show of a gentleman who was explaining his experience of seeing this craft and going to touch it and passing through the craft, passing through the skin of the craft, and being inside of this thing that was about 25. He was like, it was massive on the inside, but only about 25, 40 feet on the outside. But when I got inside, it was like huge.
It's like Harry Potter.
Totally, like different space-time thing happening. I go to the IRVA conference, the International Remote Viewing Association conference in Menlo Park, California last year for their 50th anniversary. And I'm listening to Hal Puthoff speak. Man's read into his work on scientists, his paper on scientists affecting their experiments in the lab when they got home is what led to the work on remote viewing. The idea that these things are entangled. And now, like, quantum entanglement just won the Nobel Peace Prize. Yeah. So you can say things aren't attached across the universe.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Actually are.
They are.
They actually are.
And quantum physics is like, it's not, it's actually, if you break it down, it's actually kind of simple.
Yeah.
It is.
Oh, yeah.
But people go.
It's vibration.
It's vibration. And what people do, though, is it's just like Common Core math.
Yeah.
I'll never forget the first time I saw my nephew Paulito doing Common Core math. And I sat down about 3 or 4, and I said, Mijo, what is that? He goes, well, this is how we do math. I said, what in the hell?
That ain't math.
That ain't math.
That ain't math.
Let me show you an algebraic equation.
That's not even Euclidean geometry.
Well, he went to his mother, and he's like, Wolf was in advanced placement, whatever, and he's been to school and stuff. So he went to his mother and used me as an example to show how stupid this was.
This is.
So I explained to her. I said, and I love my sister, but I said, do you see this? She's a few years older than me. I said, when did we do math like this?
Yeah, ever.
They're making it so much more. It's not necessary.
Yeah.
But quantum physics is one of those things where if you kind of, it's kind of like if you grasp it, you eventually hit that aha moment where you're like, oh, okay, I get it. And then everything is happening at once, but then it's this and it's that. And then you can fold like a piece of paper, space and time, and then you're kind of going like, now I know why these things are able to come here. Because you can walk out that door and go into another world.
Yeah. There is the concept in physics of infinity, and the fact of I can divide the space between this pin and this table to infinity. Does the pin ever actually touch it?
Here's an interesting one.
It doesn't.
It doesn't. Yeah.
The even creepier thing is the fact of this is 90% empty space. And right now, I'm sharing my electron shell with Ken Gerhardt in San Antonio and another dude in Sao Paulo, Brazil.
That's right.
I am 90% empty space. What I am feeling right now is the repulsion of electrons.
You can't feel anything.
Because we're not actually touching anything.
This isn't a physical thing.
It's not. No, it's an agreed upon story.
Yes.
Yes. And it gets even more convoluted if you do this. Let me show you the camera real quick. This is what really freaks people out. Now, my nephew, Anthony, who's sick, like I said, he's in the other room, but he came to me years ago and he was like, can you explain this? Now, this is something that I had a hard time dealing with. If I take this Zotz candy, it's a German candy, whatever, okay, and if I were to go halfway to this mouse pad, right, and I just kept going halfway to it, halfway to it, halfway to it, I'll never reach it.
Yeah.
So then,
like I said, because you can divide the half into infinity,
and so you're like, you got to wrap your mind around infinity.
Yeah.
But what is infinity? But then what'll really blow your mind, and I'm going to get into this one day on the show, is we were all one at one time, and we got splattered everywhere. If you go to, this is it's going to sound like it's off topic, but it's not. Trust me, folks. If you go and you read the Mayan, the Popol Vuh, and you go and you take their languages, okay? Oh, and then I keep forgetting, folks, remind me of these things, because there's a book. It was Padre somebody. He wrote a book about the Aztecs. I was going to bring it to you guys. I have the book. I just got to dig it out. He wrote about the Aztec language, Nahuatl. And when he looked at the language of Nahuatl, there were British people who were like coming as envoys, and they actually interacted with the Spaniards and like trying to trade, things like that, and they were teaching them English. And one of them had lived amongst the, not Tamil, it was the, not Gujarati. It was like Bangalore, India. I forgot the name of the language that they use, Kuskra. And they had the same words that the Aztecs had, and those Aztec words were given to them by the Mayans. So it blows your mind, because you're going like, whoa, wait a minute. Like, they're from two different sides of the world, but they have similar words, multiple words, not just like one or two. Like in Spanish, we have Arabic words like camarón and pantalón, right? And caballos, all these different words that are originally, because we know exactly why, because they laid down on Spain for 800 years. Yeah. Until Francis Martel drove them out. Yeah.
The Moors conquered Spain years ago.
They conquered Spain. Well, southern Spain, and it became, and then Portugal too, same thing. But you know why. But nobody knows why these Indian culture has the same words as the Aztec and Mayans. Why would that be? They had the same word for rope. I was talking to my friend from the Indus Valley earlier today, and he's Pakistani, and we were talking about this, and he was like fascinated by it. And the guy that works with him, he's from India, and they're both very intelligent guys. One's Christian, one's Muslim. We had some interesting conversations. But we were talking about this, and he was like, dude, these words, he goes, these are common words. And they're well known across, India. But imagine, though, being a Spanish child and living amongst them and then learning English simultaneously, and then being taught that some of the words that were adopted by the British were actually Indian words, and they recognized them. And so you're going like, this is mind-blowing, It's so weird. And what happens is you have words like, my friend Phil Stern said one the other day, there's a lot of words in German like, I don't want to butcher this, it's Volksspiel, but it's hard to, it means game fox, but it's not English. You can't translate it to English correctly. It's kind of like being a sneaky, sly person. Or like the word chateau, Chateau d'Aville, that's French, but there's no chateau. The guy that gave me the story about the creature coming out of the mirror, he was at a chateau. And me and my wife went over that, and she's like, what really is a chateau? And I'm like, I don't know. It's French, it's just there. Yeah. But you got this commonality where language is what is really like you see the language, you see the religions, you see it all like. So we have a common something that brought us here, brought us together. And then when I get really deep, I start asking the question, like in Genesis, when I go down that rabbit hole, and it's like God talks about the parting the waters. He talks about hovering over the deep, but they were already there. It's not saying God made them. It's we. There's this we. Yeah. And then when you start reading
make
Hebrew,
man in our image.
Yes, and it's trying to learn Hebrew, Greek, and Aramaic because I'm trying to, and I can't. It's very difficult to try.
Hebrew is very hard.
It is, but I know Arabic, some Arabic. So I'm trying to learn, and I know some Hebrew, but I'm trying to learn so I can translate these because the translations are really hard. I wanted to read you something really quick.
Please.
And this came from Giant Freaking Robot. I got to give them credit. It's a science rag. I read all these science rags. But it says scientists find structures in space that are light years in length. Okay, this is crazy, man. Now listen to this, folks. It says, it turns out those stretched out hyperspace lines from Star Wars are real. According to Esoteric Alert, a team of astrophysicists has discovered a bunch of one-dimensional filaments that are between 5 and 10 light years in length.
The cosmic superhighway.
And they're chilling in the middle of the galaxy, of the Milky Way. Dude, you know, somebody asked me the other day, Chris, and you probably can answer this because you've been around me enough to know by now. And they told me, and they were trying to be snarky, and they were like, well, why don't you pick a lane? And I was like the galaxy super. And they were like, that's the point. You're a Dogman researcher. And I'm like, I'm whatever I want to research, you know?
And that's like people telling, oh my God, what was his name? Graham Hancock.
Oh, yes.
That he's a scientist. He's like, I'm pretty sure, and I'm an investigative journalist. I've never claimed to be a scientist. And they never once.
They get all over him because he's not. And you know what it is?
And it's like, I'm not a scientist. I never said I was. I was just asking why you didn't look into it as a scientist.
Because investigative journalists a lot of times get things done.
Well, I mean, their job is to just ask questions. I'm just going to go where the evidence takes.
That's the basis of what science should be, is that you have a question and you want to find the answer. But I feel, like I said before, it's all about the answers now being correct. And that's all that matters.
I think it's really...
And being known.
Being known for being correct.
Unfortunately, I think it's very much a big problem that we have in our society as humanity to begin with, which is having the conversation on the way to the table. We tend to prejudge a lot of things in the world. How often is it that, like, you're on the way to talk to somebody, or you're waiting to hear from somebody, and you're already having the conversation in your head? You're already preparing your argument. How fair is that? Like, when you actively stop and think about it, it's not fair whatsoever. And granted, they're probably doing the same thing, but does that make it right? No. Because you're actively, you're already voicing their opinion in your head and responding to it. Like, you've already built half the wall by the time you get to the table.
And you know,
like, you may as well have built the wall of cereal boxes before you got there. Like, this is my blueberry, dude. Like,
the creation thing, though. I had somebody talk to me the other day, and she said, do you seriously, because I get people mess with me all the time because I say things that are thought-provoking and offensive.
Well, you believe things, too.
I do.
But you believe things, too.
Yes, I do. Yeah, and the thing is, I said something, and I guess it set her off, and she said, you know, up until that point, you had me as a loyal listener, and you lost me, and blah, blah, blah. I hate losing a listener, but hey, it's going to happen because not everybody's going to take the journey with me. And so she
Did you go 7-day?
No. Okay. No, look. What I told her was, she says, why would you go off the rails and start talking about all this quantum this and that? And I said, because I'm trying to get to the bottom of what this could be, of what the phenomena is that we're dealing with. And if I don't ask questions and I just throw out there story after story and leave you lost in the woods,
you're not doing your job.
I'm not doing my job because I, when somebody gives me a story, their job is done. Now you give it to me, the ball's in my court, and it's my job to tell the story. And I could throw the story out there and just leave it hanging, and you could just wonder all day long what the heck, or I could give you some theories to postulate on.
Yeah.
And this person, she was genuinely offended that I took, her on this journey that made her think. Like she was, no, for real. Like she was literally ticked off. She goes,
God, that makes my brain hurt. Because I know it so well, man. I know it so well.
It's like they're offended because you taught them something. And she's like, and now I got to go back and relearn and reread this. Like, you don't have to. You can just be ignorant,
It used to freak my helpers out in CCE because at the end of every year, whether it was 7th grade, 11th grade confirmation, or senior year, I ended every year's last class the same way. Everything I've told you this year may have been a lie.
Well,
go find out.
Well, I mean,
go read.
Right. You gotta read.
Go read. Go ask questions. If it's not in this big green book or you don't understand it, go ask the man with the collar.
That's right.
And if he doesn't know, go ask somebody else.
Theology is actually always changing too. People
Absolutely.
don't realize that. They think it's all set in stone.
No. Well, it's kind of like people who don't believe. And don't get me wrong, I am not a Bible literalist, but I understand the people that are. I firmly understand it. And when you talk about the whole argument of like, you really believe the world was created in 7 days? I'm like, considering the fact that we defined a minute, a second, and a day, yeah. Because I have no idea what a time scale of a day is to God, to the infinite.
No way.
No clue.
No way to know.
Idea.
No idea.
That could be 1,000,000 years. No idea.
And then people don't
It's all
understand
just based on size.
It's just a day.
Yeah. A day to the universe
Who knows?
could be
Maybe
nothing.
a day was an age.
Well,
and we're talking 3,600 years.
Think of this,
like
though,
according
Chris.
to the Mayan calendar, 36,000.
Yeah, exactly. And it's actually over.
That's a day.
It's over. It ended in 2012, according to them.
And that's just it.
Yeah.
According to theirs, a day is a cycle.
Yeah, and we don't exist anymore.
It didn't all end. They just didn't record past 36,000 years.
Yeah.
Like, why? Are we even going to be here? Are we even going to be thinking the same way? Because it's the end of an age. We've had all this daytime. Now it's the night. It's not the end. It's just the application of the technology that we discovered during the day. That's all the prophecy said, was now we get to apply this technology that we discovered.
Yeah.
Who knows? That may be to our detriment, may be to our best. That's up to us.
The silliest thing, though, that was told to me as of late was that, only God can create. And I said, that's
only
not
God
true.
can judge me.
God can judge. God can create, but He also creates through mankind because, like everything,
we can create.
Yeah, everything from this water bottle to this pair of glasses was started off as an idea in someone's head that became a creation.
One of the deepest things I probably talk about is the concept of Kabbalah. I love Kabbalistic teaching. I think it is absolutely phenomenal, and there's a teaching in Kabbalah. Number one, of course, in Hebrew, as you probably know, studying this, every letter has a number.
Yeah. So is Greek. Greek is the same way.
Had, number one, that is the letter for God. And according to Kabbalah, you cannot. This is where numerology comes from. Everything. You cannot start counting without the number one. Without the number one, there is no existence. It's like, wow, that's actually pretty simplistic. Like when you're just talking about an ethos to live by, without the number one, like, where do you start counting?
Yep.
You can't count without it. So that makes sense that that's God. But amongst that is the idea of vibration, the idea of everything having a vibration, the idea of you don't speak that word of God in the name of God because that is a point of creation. And we have to be careful because amongst all of creation, we uniquely were the only creature breathed into with that creative
the spark and
force,
breath and life of God.
That actual voice that breathed all of existence into being is inside of us. That's why when you say something like against someone's mom, they may take it a little more seriously than if you walk up and pop them in the gut and go, "What's up, buddy?" Well, words hurt.
Even spelling, it is to cast.
Yes.
Because whenever the word spelling literally has to do with spells.
Yep.
Because that's what you're doing when you write. And that's
intentionally.
The intent was there. Yeah.
Yeah. That's how you used to cast spells, was to literally write it down on a tablet, and cast it to the underworld.
That's right.
Over your shoulder into a well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And people don't know, like why, somebody asked me about a couple weeks ago's episode, and I wanted to get your take on this. The Greek, Hebrew, and Latin, classical Latin in particular,
Yes.
were used on the placard above, here is Jesus, King of the Jews. It was set above his head as a mockery. Okay.
Sure.
But everything that Jesus touched or had anything to do with, it turned into something, and so that's why those languages have a lot of power. And then, of course, Latin became liturgical Latin, ecclesiastical Latin.
Yep.
And then you had Greek, but you had different types of Greek now. You had Orthodox and Romantic and classical.
Yeah, and Latin was one of those. It was a written language. Nobody rolled around speaking Latin.
Speaking too much, yeah. Even when John was in the Isle of Patmos.
People spoke Italian.
Yeah, they wrote in Greek.
Yeah.
Greek was much easier to write, and it was
far fewer declinations,
far fewer, and it was like alpha, beta, delta, whatever, and those letters turned into numbers, and so you had an entire language system, but those languages were very important and very powerful, and those were written to show everybody,
those are the languages of magic.
They are.
Aside from Arabic.
You're talking about Kabbalistic, yeah.
Aside
absolutely.
from Arabic.
Arabic, yeah.
It's Hebrew, Enochian magic.
Enochian, yeah.
Arabic magic, Grecian magic, Agrippa, things like that. And then Latin.
Yeah.
Those are the four languages of magic.
Yeah. And when you talk about magic, people got to understand too, Lo, it really is a science.
It is.
Those are scientific, and why those languages have a commonality and a common root. And I believe that it goes back, and I've said this before about the Anunnaki. When I first started my show, my co-host was big on the whole Sitchin thing, Sitchin, whatever. And I was kind of like reserved about it. But then as I read more into it and went more into Van Danigan, I went back and reread the Church of the Gods, which I didn't really understand when I read it when I was like 17. And then I even read Bud Hopkins, Intruders, and I was reading all that stuff at that time. So I went through my whole UFO phase as a teenager. And I was still trying to wrap my mind around and understand what I saw. Because I had people coming at me going like, oh, it was a demon. Oh, it was an alien. Oh, it was this. It was that. It was Brujeria. It was, it was a werewolf. I don't know what it was, but I needed to know.
But you saw something.
Yeah, and I needed to know, and when you're talking about the different languages and when you go down the rabbit hole, it's like, why are those particular languages so important? And during abduction cases I've gotten where people said that they've heard people speaking those languages broken into different parts.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really weird. These aliens will talk to them in 2 or 3 different languages to figure out which one, like not the ones that they're like dealing with up front. But this one lady said this mantis-looking creature that was almost like a hybrid between a gray and one of the real big tall mantis ones.
Yeah, the insectids.
The insectoids, yeah. And it came in, and it didn't know exactly what was going on. So its first question was in Latin, and she only knew that it was Latin because she had taken Latin in school, and she said, I was in a Catholic school, I took Latin. And so she began to answer it in Latin. Then it said, "Oh, that's not your main language. You speak English."
But hold on, I can tell that declination is totally wrong.
Yeah. So many different languages. It was like zipped through like a hyperspace computer. And eventually, like after 11 or 12 of them, it's like, oh, English. Okay, that's what you are.
Yeah.
And the other two kind of turned around and they told him, this person is from such and such.
Yeah.
But she was an immigrant originally. She was from Hungary, and she was living in Beaumont, Texas. And she was talking about this abduction scenario that had taken place, but it happened. She'd moved 12 times. And no matter where she moved, they could find her.
Yeah.
She pulled at least 3 trackers from her body.
Wow.
And so when she would talk about these different creatures, she said that she actually met one with this what I call the blues. They have these tall, skinny blue type whatever. And this creature, whatever, literally showed her 136 different languages in a matter of seconds.
Wow. And
it was just like downloading information from its brain into hers. And it was talking about strands of DNA and how we can only handle so much information. And our brains aren't equipped. but they don't according to this being, they don't exist in the same way that we do. Their vibration is much more loose, and they don't that's why they're sort of like a wispy type of spiritual creature, not so much physical flesh and blood, and that's our true form, and that we agree upon a reality that they do not. So, and they can manipulate it, which makes it give the appearance of like magic, you know. But
this is something interesting that I just posted the other day, where they were talking about triple-stranded DNA.
Yeah,
and that actually being a scientific thing now. That is something that the work of Sitchin talked about. That is something that many other people have talked about, is the idea that these other races of aliens, things like that, have additional DNA, that the Anunnaki, things like that, had additional DNA. And to see them now scientifically talking about the actual possibility of being able to wrap another strand of DNA around human DNA, like for viruses, things like that, to build immunities, that kind of thing. We live in an amazing day and age where we are going to see things. We are moving at a roiling. We're past the point of boiling as a society and a humanity, scientifically, philosophically, everything. We're moving at light speed now. And where we're going to go in the next even 5 years is phenomenal to think about. I guess the real question comes, how do we learn to process this as a society? How do we learn to give each other that kind of the same way that we're seeing it right now on such a backlash of lifestyle acceptance? You know, and it's one of those, I'm pretty sure in that first document that was drafted, there was this whole thing about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Like,
one of the things that, you know, and like when you talk to people who've had abduction scenarios, I've always asked them, I was like, what did you ask these beings? And one of the questions they've asked is like, you know, do they have a religion? Do they eat like we do? Do they do this? Do they do that? And the one of the worst things that I heard someone say, and this guy, he was abducted, and he was from New Mexico, and he said, you know, I asked one of these beings that was involved in this, and it was a gray. It was a tall one. And he goes, it was just, they have no emotion. It's like they're biological robots. And he says, why, if you have all this technology, why don't you use it to help us? And he was like, why would we?
That's not our job.
That's not our job. And then he basically told him, he says, your life, if you die, you know, you're insignificant. One person's death is insignificant.
Yeah.
And in fact, it seems to be like actually a numbers game for them, that they want a lot of us to die.
It may be the only way that we actively learn.
Yeah, it's
Josh,
very weird.
Sadly, horribly. Look at the situation that just happened. Literally just happened. And like I said earlier, when you said, what does NASA stand for? Like I said, it's hard for me not to knee-jerk complete the joke as a kid of the 80s. And, you know, people died in the search of exploration. Billionaire, and even the whole thing of like the people conspiratorially talking about these people fake their deaths. Okay, so 5 billionaires are going to go fake their deaths at the same time. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that was pretty.
And wreck a whole company while doing it.
Think about this though. Have you thought about this though? I mean, the billionaires. There was 4 of them.
Yeah,
they were billionaires, and then the pilot. You know who? You know he's the one that was trying to. You know, but. Okay, I could say so many things about this.
Go ahead. I don't
want to get, you know, defunded here or whatever. You know, it's like YouTube put the smack. I said something about the moon landing a couple years ago.
Oh, and they smacked you down?
I lost. Yeah. I mean, you know, so something happens, you know, it's like, But now it's a little more. I have a little more skin in the game now because I can't be getting in trouble. Like,
no.
promote the conference and stuff.
And that's just it. And that's why you got to kind of predicate it by the fact.
Got to dial it back a little bit.
This is. I'm not saying this is fact. I'm not saying this is. We're not saying that this was the reasoning behind the accident.
Mm-hmm. I just want to say this. There were 8 millionaires that were on the Titanic that were tied to certain families.
Yes.
And 6 of those 8 were very influential who had partners who ended up benefiting from them hitting an iceberg. Let's just say that. And I'll just throw that out there.
That is definitely
these 4 billionaires are tied to certain, plus I don't want to be killed for saying something that I'll be real honest, if people get... I had somebody tell me the other day, and I'm gonna come out and say this. Christopher's right here.
I'm right here.
And Rick me and Rick had even kind of talked. Rick's like, well, maybe you shouldn't talk about it on the show, But I'm gonna throw it out there, and I'm gonna say this. Like, I believe that if you get too smart, and I'm not saying I'm super smart, but I'm saying if you get a little too...
You ain't stupid.
I'm not stupid. If you get a little too close to the sun, your wings do melt.
Absolutely, Bubba.
I had somebody reach out to me the other day and said, you need to dial it back because you're going into some really dark territory. This person, 36 years, their brother was in politics, and this person was 36 years in law enforcement and a higher up, He's a nice guy. He's my friend's dad. My friend's deceased now. Unfortunately, he had drug issues, whatever. But he said, I watched your show a few times, and he goes, and you're getting kind of, so he's kind of warning me, like, look.
Getting a little too close to the...
Yeah, and when you start to get to the center of the Tootsie Pop, like what happens is not a sweet and chewy center. It could be
the wall gets thinner.
Yeah.
The wall just gets thinner.
Yes. And so I was kind of told that, you can only say so much, and then somebody's eyes are gonna, they're gonna catch. Then they're gonna see, they're gonna start paying attention to you. He's like, right now you're still flying under the radar. Now we do have not just YouTube, but we have thousands of people across 16 platforms that listen to us.
Yep.
And they're starting to pay attention a little more. So I do have to be careful what I say about who I say it about.
Literally, before I came over here tonight, I had a guest of mine give me a call. We're very, very good friends off the air, as many of your guests and you are. That's just the way that these communities work. And he was like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm getting ready to head out to an interview. He's like, you got a minute to talk? It's like, sure. And he called me up and he was like, dude, I got to talk to somebody about this, and I don't know who else I could decompress this to. He's written a couple of books on targeting technology, things like that, and is in the middle of a new book, and went through a divorce recently, things like that, was in the middle of seeing a lady friend of his who he's known for years and years, and they went out to dinner with some friends who work for an alphabet agency. They work for an agency that deals in drugs.
I know you're talking.
Which one could that be?
I don't know. And they met him, everything else. Well, that office happens to be in the office next to the FBI. Now, this guy has to have his work cleared by departments in the federal government whenever he publishes works to make sure that anything he's talking about isn't still classified, that kind of stuff. So they are well aware of him in the FBI office, especially for the fact that he does quite a bit of representing of people in court who have been on the targeting side of these technologies as a professional, saying like, oh, no, this technology exists. So they definitely know about him. And as we were talking, he was like, man, I'm really surprised that you haven't been targeted yet.
Yeah.
He's like, like, as frequently as we just talk, as frequently as you have me on your show, and the things that we openly talk about, I'm really surprised that you haven't been targeted. And I'm like, what's really funny though is every time I have you on, every time I have like Dr. Robert Duncan on, things like that, it's funny to see my listens in Virginia kick up.
Yeah.
To see my numbers in just in the Virginia area, rise for like 2 weeks and then drop back down.
Yeah, and then when I'll be honest, at that conference, in Tennessee, I had somebody tell me that there was somebody there, and I did recognize I didn't recognize him, but I did see a person who was alone, and he was there, and he kind of stuck out like a sore thumb, and he did not communicate with anyone, and he just kind of looked around, and you can spot
little
him.
para looking. But not in the normal kind of way.
You could tell he was not. He was just checking us out to see what we were doing, and then about halfway through he left, because I guess he figured, these people are full of crap. They're talking about werewolves and they don't know what they're talking about. I don't know if he thought that, or maybe he just gave up or what. But I think he was there to see what we were doing. I mean, and we're not doing anything.
Well,
Delilah says no answer. Thanks, Wolf. Look, I'm in the middle of a conversation. Thank you for everybody who donated. Donations are not expected, but they are appreciated, and thank you so much for that. It helps a lot. It's all going toward the conference. Delilah, let me answer that as best I can. Wolf, are aliens demons? And the best question is, are demons aliens?
Yeah.
I don't know, but I'll say this: it really doesn't matter. I mean, I came to that conclusion that either way, if they're doing evil, then and aliens are demons. I mean, it's the same thing. I mean, they're not from this world.
Yeah, they're not
of this world.
You're not gonna change anything by being able to identify them one way or another.
No,
because they're still gonna do what they do, unless you have like a definite way to say like these are one thing and these are the other. You're just gonna forever be in the veil of mystery.
I would say that the one disappointing thing that I have about Dr. Stephen Greer and CE5 is the concept of they are all good.
Yeah,
that they are
I was
all
wondering if you were going to hit on that, because
that's my one
they're
big
not
issue.
Space Brothers, dude.
I'm not saying that the great majority of them ain't. I mean, you could probably depend on a good 70 to 72% of the population to be decent human beings.
Yeah.
But humanity on a different level, bud.
I know.
So do I. There's an undercurrent. There's an undercurrent that's there, and a percentage of people that is just their mentality. And I think one of the big problems that we have when it comes to any of this stuff is our want to anthropomorphize. That same thing that my psychology professor warned me about when I was watching the gorillas at the Dallas Zoo. Chris, you cannot assume the fact that they are thinking a human thought. You cannot assume the fact that why they picked that stick up and hit it against the tree was to get a nut out of the tree. You can't assume that. You're assuming that. You're assuming the fact that because we as humanity would of course evolve into some great society. We want to evolve into a society where we take care of everybody, right? So, well, if they could travel amongst the stars, they would definitely be that way. That's a little haughty to think so.
What do you think about this? When I was
we can travel amongst the stars, and we ain't that way.
Yeah, exactly.
We're far from that way, dude.
We're warlike. I mean, we're very, very apt to attack you. We're like, we see a UFO, shoot it. Kill it with fire. That's the first thing you want to do.
Well, I mean, I was going to say, like, definitely when we go to Mars in about 100 years, all that's going to happen is we're going to go to war.
Oh, you think we're actually going to make it? We're going to be back down to zero, bro.
No, I'm saying, like, if we ever...
But we're not going to do anything because they're all under the space.
My point is, though, is that if we ever created something on there and there's a big old civilization, all that's going to happen is that Earth and Mars is going to go to war.
Oh, yeah.
That's all.
Turner said Quantico. That's exactly what I was thinking. Because Quantico, hey, it's Marine Corps, though. Hey. One of the things I was going to say, about the Balmeria thing, the end of that story, just to explain what happened, this entity came up. It was like a wispy-looking smoke with goat horn-looking things. The face looked wolfish to my friend, and then it was just gone, and you could see the magic salt that was spread around was just kind of moved, and then it was gone out the door. So they unleashed something. Now, the question would be, was that an alien? Did an alien show up that looks like a demonic werewolf goat man? Or is that a demon, just a straight up demon, and it's like demons, are they aliens or are aliens demons?
Or a thought form.
I thought, well, there you go.
Because I mean, tulpa or egregore is another word for it, depending on where you are in the world. But and it's literally an entity that comes about through shared thought form.
And we've talked about that on the show.
Yeah. I've asked this question: is like, do you
Philip experiment?
Believe that the myth came before the legend, or the cryptid, or do you think the cryptid?
And that's the Gaetano episodes where we talk about what came first.
That's the thing too. Is like, is any of it real?
This conference, though, I think with so many big people coming down to that conference, I think we're gonna have a meeting of the minds. If nothing else, dude,
pretty cool, man.
I think what's gonna happen is gonna be a lot of collaborations are gonna come out of it because it did last year. A lot of people came and worked together and came together. And bringing the walls down, and that's why I thought Ron Moorhead was so important of a choice to bring, because Ron is old school. The Sierra Sounds, everything that he's done. And I had a long conversation with Ron, and one of the things that I admired about him. He's not the cookie cutter, like, scientific approach. Like, he's talking like, I believe this, now I believe that. You know what I mean? Yeah. Whereas Meldrum and Coleman and all them have, now Coleman we'll get into a little bit further out there. He'll go like the name game. Yeah. Like why, like he told me about, the name game. Like, why is it the Taylor, Mississippi, Taylor, Michigan, Taylor, Texas? It's a really weird thing. Like Meldrum won't even get to that point. Well, like it's typically like Jeff's sort of like, it's going to be this way. And if I can't scientifically alter and create and do whatever, then I don't want to be a part of that. But he plays well with others. That's the good thing. He'll let you talk. But I don't agree with Meldrum, but I do agree with Moorhead. Because Ron, being there at the conference, he's the OG. Like, he's gone down the rabbit hole with Bigfoot and what he thinks it is, and he's very open to it. Yeah, and I think you and I are the new generation. We're the hybrids. Like we are very much like it could be this or it could be that, but we have to explore all sides, and we need to stop cutting data and stop compartmentalization. I don't see why MUFON can't work with BFRO. Why can't NADP and IDP and all these other groups get along? Because everybody has a different take on it, but everybody should be able to be heard, and that's what the conference does. Yes. Because Gerhardt, like, he's an aper, Oh, yeah. So when you listen to him, and Lyle is aper, kind of a little more leans, but because he's living in a Honda freak. It's like, I don't know if he wants me saying that, but I mean, it's the truth. I mean, it's like,
it's hard to deny
it's
an
hard
experience.
It's hard to deny it. And then you got David, who's very, like, he's rounded, like well-rounded, like he's kind of like we are,
He has a lot of the traditional native teachings behind his work.
Yeah, and he's very like J.C. Johnson, same way. Those guys, they didn't cherry pick the native. Like, I have a large audience of Native Americans that listen to me, and I have a few of them that actually do their own podcast. I need to get them on one day. And they're reservation kids, and I've talked to them, and one of them told me just recently, he says, dude, you're one of the few guys out there who tell the whole story. He goes, you don't you don't just talk about Bigfoot and cherry pick. He goes, you give the whole story. Like when I had my cousin Trey on about the Wind River Reservation, he for a long time was with a Shoshone woman.
Oh, wow.
And he got a little trouble. He ended up doing some time in tribal jail. But that's another story. But he ended up having the full experience of living there for almost 4.5 years. Wow. And he said, dude, he goes, it's all connected. But the problem is, and this is my cousin who's white, he's like you. He's like, blonde hair, blue eyes. But he said that a lot of the white people, though, they like to cherry pick certain native stuff and then ignore the rest of it. Yeah. They're like, well, the natives believe this. And then I'm like, yeah, but they also believe this. Oh, yeah, but I'm going to ignore that part because that's inconvenient for me. Yeah. So they just kind of toss
that
out
an inconvenient
truth there. I'm not going to pick, with that. But I think that's why it's important to have all these different people to come together, because what's going to happen is there's going to be a huge coming together. And I do believe we're going to usher in the new era. I believe the new era is coming. I believe it's here, but it's not completely accepted. But we are all going to have to start working together, because if we don't,
absolutely,
this compartmentalization's killing it. It's killing it.
And that's exactly what the NASA panel was saying. Yeah, is like, hey, we could have been involved in this for years, had people not ridiculed the work. Had people not ridiculed the science that's actually there and looking into it, we'd have, who knows what.
Yeah.
And even the head of Arrow was like, listen, man, I'm here to tell you, I'm part of the defense and intelligence industry. I got instruments that are more sensitive than what you got, NASA. All right? I can't use them. It would take an act of Congress for me to point them inside of our shores. Mm-hmm. And they are loath to do that because these things are used to put weapons platform on a target across the world, not to look at somebody's backyard in Detroit. However, NOAA, you have satellites that are authorized to look at Detroit all day long.
That's right.
If your satellites can pick up these frequencies, let us know. Because now we can share data. Mm-hmm. Hey, NASA, you have satellites that are allowed to look at America. If your satellites can see these ranges, let's start cooperating. Let's start saying, we had this sighting. It's meeting these anomalous requirements. Can you pull up the satellite data from this region on this day? Mm-hmm. And now we can look for those signals. Now we can see those things. And now it's not compartmentalized, like you're saying. Mm-hmm. Now it's not a poking in the dark of an American Airlines pilot says something, well, maybe he'll get a form. A Navy pilot says something, here's your half-assed form. Like, you can't get any scientific data like that because there's not a unified process of reporting. Right. Mm-hmm. And once you have a unified process of reporting, at least now we're all getting the same data to cull through and to look at with our different investigative means.
I also think an issue is that people who don't see anything are so quick to ridicule because they want to be special and they think like, oh, my view on life is correct. And that because I didn't see a cryptid and because I didn't see a UFO and because I didn't see ghosts, that must mean those don't exist.
Yes.
When it's like, you should realize you're not special. You don't have whatever it is that allows you to be more in tune with these things that obviously a lot of other people are seeing.
Yeah.
And so like for me, for instance, I wouldn't say I have a lot of experience. I've had at most 2. But I am still willing to believe a lot of other people because I understand.
You've read so many.
Yeah.
You being a part of Paranormal, the roundtable, is not really, that's not fair because how many reports have you fielded and read and heard? Yeah. I mean, 100, 1,000? Like,
yeah, but if I base it off of my own experience, those would mean nothing to me because it's like I've only had these 2 ghost experiences. So then hearing about cryptids and hearing about UFOs, I'd be like, well, how am I supposed to believe that?
Well, yeah, true. But does your experience
dictate,
give you more acceptance because you've had an experience?
That's what I'm saying. So. It shouldn't. I think that you having an experience should at least allow you to understand that there's things that you don't understand.
Yes.
At the very least.
Exactly.
And if you, just because you didn't have an experience,
should make you more open-minded.
But all it does is kind of, I think, close off some people. And I think that's an issue that is going to be always going to have to happen is because there's going to be those people that don't have experiences and they're so willing to be like, oh, nothing of it exists because of the fact that they don't have that. And unless we can figure out a way to kind of show those people that there is a world that you don't understand and that you need to understand that you don't understand anything.
I love that Carl Sagan quote where he's like, we should stop looking for life as we know it and look for life as we don't even understand it.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Because one of the things that I proposed years ago, I'm talking like when I was a teenager, I was like, what if life is silicone-based?
Yeah.
And I had said something about that, and people did not understand what the hell I was talking about. Of course, elemental tables, well, I'm sure this little turd over here will tell you. I'm not trying to be mean, but he was supposed to do a bunch of push-ups, which he still hasn't done. Yeah. We were trying to raise money for the conference. So this dude was supposed to do a bunch of push-ups. So he sat over there trying to, I don't know what he was writing, but he was writing a bunch of stuff. And
it was push-up chart.
Yeah, what he was trying to do was, what were you trying to do? Screw me around with the quotes?
So him and Anthony decided to have a test of my body. So I was like, I'll test his mind. It'll be a body versus mind thing. So I just wrote a bunch of quotes from philosophers and just different people that I knew he was familiar with. It wasn't like I just chose random people. And then I just tested those quotes against him to see if he knew who said them. Yeah. And, you know,
I got most of them right.
All right.
it's pretty fun.
He tried to be cute with me, you know, whatever. But you still owe a bunch of push-ups, folks. We haven't forgotten.
Yeah, I haven't forgotten either.
He's just pretending like he's forgotten, but I haven't. People don't forget. The messed up thing, though, like if you look at the elemental tables, right, and you here, I'm going to say something, and this is so weird. This is how people are. Now, this is an actual scientist who argued with me. This guy is not. He is a molecular. I mean, this is like something you should know, right? And he got on, of course, Facebook's where all the smart people are, but he really is. I looked him up. He has his credentials, and I'm not going to call him out. I don't do that. But he said that gold cannot be created, that alchemy is not real. And I said, you're full of crap, dude.
Yeah.
And he goes, show me where this has actually happened. And the Japanese, of course, they actually found a way to change mercury. But it took so much energy.
They removed one atom.
One atom, because it is on
one proton.
Right, yeah.
One proton.
Right next to the elemental table. Yeah. So the joke was made the other day where we were eating dinner a couple days ago, and Anthony said something about, well, maybe we can do, because I heard him talk, or conspiring, and he's like, maybe we could trip up Wolf with the elemental table. And I was like, I look at Nelly, I'm like, yeah, go ahead and try that, dude, okay? I'm not like the biggest science nerd, but next to history, science is my bag. And I was like, go ahead, let's do that. So I didn't say anything, but y'all can go ahead and try. But I'm going to tell you right now, mercury, I mean, it's called quicksilver, and it's highly poisonous, very poisonous. Yep. But this guy, he had to go back and look this up. I don't know if he Googled it or what in the middle of the argument. And 2 or 3 other people posted a video, like a short video of them talking about it. And then he shut up. And I was like, this guy is a scientist. He doesn't know this? Now, why? Or does he just?
Not everybody follows the trades.
But you should know. I mean, look, I talked to an actor.
One would think. Yeah. And that is another prime example of, because, people ask me all the time, like, where do you find these things? I'm like, I'm a news hound. Like, that's what I did. One of my dirty secrets is I was the former on-air producer for Alex Jones. Like, that was...
You used to go... Now, I'm going to ask you this.
That was my job, was to live inside the man's head and sit there with 3 computers and be like, okay, he's talking about this, so he may go here, he might go here, and start pulling up articles that we had talked about previously and things that we talked about. And then eventually he would hit that, and I'd be like, that's up on computer 3.
Yeah.
And start scrolling through the article.
I met him years ago at the Public Access, because Alex's dad he had a show, the Mope Show on Public Access, and we would go on after him, and he was in there screaming and yelling all the time. Wow. Yeah, and so one day I was at Susie's Chinese Kitchen. It's not there anymore, and I walk in there, and I'm with Anthony and my friend Arash, who actually has had a Dogman encounter. He's in my book. And I walk in and I hear rah, 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 and I look over and I know that voice anywhere. And I sat behind him and I'm like,
can't not know it.
I'm like, Alex. And he turned around, he sees me, and we kind of started talking. And then Anthony was like, you know him? I said, yeah, I know him. I've known him for years. We're not like best friends or anything, but living in Austin, it's kind of surreal because you get to know a lot of different people, and it's like it's like this. Like, gosh, I've met so many people here, like either from the fight community, or you meet actors. You meet so many people that that are from television, radio.
It's a mixed pot here.
Yeah, and so you could be downtown on 6th Street, and I met Forrest Whitaker like that. Yeah. I mean, I've met them all. What's his name? Ricky Williams. I had a drink with him one time. Earl Campbell. Gosh, dude, I can't. There's so many of them I've met. Danny Trejo, Tarantino's down there, with Robert Rodriguez, Matthew McConaughey. I don't know if they're like them. I can't say like they're my best friends or anything. But one of the guys I'm friends with is what's his name? Grandma's boy. Peter Dante.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he's screaming at me at Lakeline Mall, and I was with Barton Nunley, and I went up and he started talking. He said, "Oh, what's up, bro?" And all this stuff. And I guess he was with his son. Sounds like a musician now. He plays music, but I didn't know Dante did. But I guess he was trying to get a house in San Marcos, and you run into so many of these people. It's wild. Like you'll you never know who actually watches you or pays attention to you. And when I was talking to him, one of the things I started thinking, I was like, if you look at 6 degrees of separation, dude, it's like you probably know. You know what I mean? Like, you know, all these people because, you know, he worked with Adam Sandler, and I was watching a movie the other day with Adam Sandler and what's her name?
Jennifer
Aniston. And my wife's like, it's weird. She's like, because you know one of his really good friends. And I'm like, yeah, I do. And, you know, and I'm sure the same is for you. You've met all these people doing what you do because you're always at all these conferences and you're known by everyone, which is surprising that no more people don't know who you are. You know what I mean? Because I was like, when I first met you, I thought they're like, everybody talks so highly of you. And they were like, you got to meet Christopher Jordan. You got to meet Christopher Jordan. This guy's, he's a tech genius. He's really smart. He's got this and that. And I go, the Conan O'Brien looking guy?
Yeah. That
like,
nerdy dude.
And I was like, but you were so friendly and so upbeat. And then when I started talking to you, and you and Daniel Jones like struck a chord with me because I thought you're very, very humble. I say I'm humble, but I'm not. I just talk crap. But you know, I'm the humblest of the humbles, you know. Yeah. But you and Daniel Jones are two of the smartest guys. And so I was getting ready to do a series with him and Nick Redfern. And I told my wife, I said, it was something that it was something missing. I wanted to wait on it. And she's like, why do you want to wait on it? And I said, I don't know. I think there's somebody else going to come into this picture. And believe it or not, it was Anne Celine, you know, Ken's girlfriend, whatever.
Oh, yeah.
And she's great.
She's
psychic, dude. You know?
Oh, yeah.
And then my wife was like, I kind of feel that too, you know. And then Anne was like, it's Christopher. And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, it's Christopher Jordan. She's like, that's who's missing. It's like, y'all need to sit down and do a panel like you did with Ken, Lyle, and Barton, you know, about it was 2 Octobers ago. And people still ask me about that show. And we did Bigfoot, Dogman. Is it metaphysical or is it physical?
Yeah.
But I think we need to do a show, you know, and we need to talk about disclosure.
Sure.
And I think we need to talk about, and I don't want to talk
Big D,
about
little D, because there's different ones.
There's two, yeah, exactly. That's the thing too. And when somebody said something about Greer, and no offense, but Stephen Greer has not said anything new in a long time.
long time.
It just sounds like the same repetitive. You know, it's like
there was some good stuff in this last disclosure meeting that happened. But once again, it's one of those. I have a hard time with the "they're all our friends" situation.
Yeah, they're not.
They can't be. That's just not how math works.
They're not all friends.
That's not how math works.
You know, I'm a big numbers guy too. I'm a big numbers guy, and I am OCD with numbers. You know, and I was talking to somebody about this earlier. You know who Nikola Tesla is, right?
Oh,
of course, absolutely. 3, 6, and 9.
He's my man. Yeah.
Oh, he's the man. Like so, when you go down the rabbit hole and you look up 3, 6, 9, folks, I don't have time on this show to explain it to you.
Oh, we could do a whole numerological episode of 3, 6, and 9.
Absolutely. That's why
the universe works on it.
Well, the universe brought us here. I mean, I'm telling you, there's a reason. And so
I know.
I really believe that, and it sounds hokey pokey, but it's real. And then I was reading about Nikolai Kozyrev and the Kozyrev mirror. And so I was thinking, when you look at these people's like their theories, and if you put them together, and they're both named Nikolai too, it's so weird. You know, it was almost like, and both of them were pretty much entangled. The government wanted something from them. Yeah. Of course, Kozyrev was under communism. The Soviet Union he was imprisoned, and they tried to get him to talk about this and that, and he just sat there for 10 years being quiet and making algebraic equations on his wall.
Yeah.
And he came up with this bending space and time mirror, which when I was younger, I always had this weird feeling that if you put two mirrors, I mean, this is like a little kid, right? Thinking if you put two mirrors together, you know, and you see yourself walking towards and behind, you know what I mean? You see multiple versions of yourself.
That's how I explained feedback to people.
Exactly.
When they're like, I don't know why feedback happens. I'm like, okay, so have you ever been in a dressing mirror? You've got a microphone hearing itself on the speaker that's hearing the microphone hear itself on the speaker that's hearing the microphone hear itself on the speaker. That's feedback. Yeah. That's how the same way as you've got a mirror looking at a mirror, looking at a mirror, looking at a mirror. Like
and into infinity. Because infinity is where we're talking about, and it loops around, and that's why in the ancient Chinese, up to the modern day, 8 is the sacred number, because it's the number of infinity. That's why. But when you look at the numbers, and if you add them together, it really, really, really starts to like make sense. And when I was studying Kozyrev's mirror, And then I went to sleep and I had a weird dream. And I had a dream that I was in a mirror, but because I fell asleep reading about it. And then I started thinking about it. And in the dream, I had this weird, and it just came to me like I was driving over here. And you know how you're driving? And when I'm driving is when I remember dreams, or in the shower.
Yeah.
And I'll just be like, whoa, that's weird. You know, I had a dream and it came to me. A lot of times you don't remember. But I remember being in like this mirror and this being that was actually me, but like a different looking me, and was saying that we're all infinite. And it was like, then we sit down here and then you start talking about infinity. And then you're sitting here going like, whoa, dude. And then it's just kind of like it all comes together. And I thought, you know, today I really thought coming into the studio that I would learn something. And I did, you know. And it's like every time I work with one of you guys, it's like the exchange of information is so free-flowing and so easy.
Yeah.
That there's got to be something there. Because, you know, I've had conversations with people where it's like rubbing nails on a chalkboard.
It's like pulling teeth, dude.
Yeah,
it's like pulling teeth.
Yeah. And you try to get them to like give you the information, and you're like, they want to talk about everything but the information, you know? And it's like when we work together, it's like it just boom, 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 it clicks. Yeah. But I think a lot of it has to do with like attracts like, and then it's the laws of the universe that come together and gives you answers.
I think it's also a mutual understanding, though. We both know the ground that we're coming from. We both know the common ground that we have. And we both are open-minded, and not just open-minded enough, both properly skeptical enough to be willing to have our minds changed. And that to loop it back to that part of the conversation, that is...
The more you learn, the more it changes.
The more you know, man. The more you know.
Yeah, I mean,
let the star go across the screen and ding now. But yeah, it literally is the more you know, and it's the idea of without that collaboration, we don't grow. We don't have a larger worldview. We don't have a larger spiritual view by which to do our jobs as hosts and to have a bigger conversation.
I mean, they always say, like, you can't really learn unless you fail, and you can't really understand what's right unless you're wrong.
That's right.
I mean, it's as simple as that.
Well, and willing to accept that you're wrong. Willing to be like, oh, well. And that's just it. Proper skepticism, it and poo-poo and everything. It isn't saying like, my God, you're an idiot.
Or being arrogant about it.
Or being arrogant. It's about being open-minded enough to points of datum, to add them to your data set, to actively change your opinion. And to go, ooh, wow. Number one, I've never considered that, because number two, I was not aware of that. That totally changes the way I view the world. And being willing to let your mind be changed.
Yep. And it's very important, too.
It's hugely important.
It's especially... I think the problem I feel like I have we had a big fight with this guy over researchers that go into the woods and they just spend months on ends in the woods looking for a specific cryptid. I think a big issue I have with that is that they're looking for that specific cryptid. And I feel like if they went in there and just be like, anything that happens, I'll be happy with.
Accepting whatever happens.
Yeah. And then you follow those leads based on what's going on.
Let me explain to Christopher, though, real quick, Tony, because I want to make sure you understand what I'm saying here.
Sure.
It came off as like I was attacking people for researching out in the woods.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
And my friend Adam Davies notwithstanding, he went out in the woods willing to live there. So I'm not talking about Adam. What I'm talking about, and I'm not talking about people who go out there to look, people that don't have a body of work. Because I had somebody, and that started with this one guy, and I don't want to call him out because
you ain't gotta say anything.
But he got onto my nerves, and he said I should be a speaker at the conference. And so I asked him a very simple question. I said, "What is your body of work?" He goes, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "What books have you written? What papers have you authored? I mean, what are you on a show? What is your body of work?" And he goes, "Oh, I gotta prove that I'm a researcher." And I'm like, "Yeah, because anyone can be a researcher, dude. If my dog gets loose and runs out in the woods for a day, it can come back and be a researcher. Okay, that's my problem." And he said, "Well, I was at such and such conference in blah blah blah, and they let me talk." And I'm like, "Congratulations to them.
That's awesome."
Because that's
not my conference.
That's not my conference. Because you need to have a body of work. Because nobody's going to show up with all these 20 people who are, in the know, that are going to be there talking, you have to be, I mean, this is the big boys.
Yeah.
So you got to be able to come in there and bring your, something to the table and say, hey, look, man, I've authored these books. I've gotten a show with, so many episodes with a body of work that I could look at. He could give me nothing. And so then I became a big poo-poo-caca head and a bunch of other bad adjectives and whatever.
Yeah.
And gave me whatever he could. And I just blocked him. And then he was on another group, and it was in this Nephilim group, whatever. And he said something about, this guy, he thinks he knows everything, blah, blah, blah. Won't let me speak. And I'm like, I would let you speak if you could show me a body of work.
I think
but he couldn't.
A better way to say it is, what is the results of all your research? It's like you can't just be researching and not have nothing to show for it. Yeah, and as long as if you don't have anything to show for it, then what are you going to be speaking about?
He never even had an experience.
Exactly.
What is your going hypothesis? What evidence do you have to show that?
Exactly. It's like what's your process in finding out research, or like what's your process of finding out what you need, instead of just going out and like, I've did this for so long and now I have the authority to speak on it because I've put in the time to do this. And doing the time isn't the point. The whole point of doing the time is to find the results.
Yep.
And if you don't have those results, then why would we allow you to speak?
It reminds me, my first show, which still exists, Talking Sound, all about my beloved AV industry, things like that. I want to say it was in season 1, maybe season 2. I did a solo episode called 10,000 Hours to Be a Professional.
Wow.
The old adage that we've all heard, like, it takes 10,000 hours to be a professional. And I started breaking it down. And I actually broke it down math-wise on screen, and it basically came out to like 30 hours a week for 5 years. Mm-hmm. So it's like, all right, that's basically like having a part-time job for 5 years. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, if you've done something 30 hours a week for 5 years, you can call yourself a professional.
So I'm a professional podcaster.
And that pretty, if you look at it, like back in the day, our grandparents' time, things like that, that's about when an apprentice would move up to a journeyman.
That's right.
And when a journeyman would move up to a master, would be 10 years. Once you've been doing it for 10 years. So, I mean, there's a point where you could say, yes, I am a professional researcher. I have been out in the field researching Bigfoot 30 hours a week for the last 5 years.
Yeah, and I have
or the equivalent over your
some
life.
results because of that too.
Have you?
Yeah.
I would even say, there are many young people out there, you yourself included, people like Ryan Edwards. Like, good God, I love talking to Ryan Edwards.
Ryan is smart, dude. He is so analytical.
Boy, and
talking about Dracula on the rails.
Were you there for Dracula on the Rails?
I think he might,
when he got his car stuck on the railroad tracks?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, dude! It was like we were talking about.
Me and my brother
Ryan.
breezed past it because we were talking and almost missed the curve. And we're like, oh my God, that's a death curve, dude! It almost killed that guy.
It's Ryan.
And then we got to dinner, and he showed up late, and it was like, oh my God, that was you on the tracks. Oh, geez.
Dude, Lyle talked about at dinner when I was with him and David and Ken.
Yeah.
And of course, my wife was there and David's wife was there. Yeah. She was like, she's from Ireland. She's like, my goodness, I thought he was going to die.
Yeah.
And then Lyle goes, all I see is like Dracula get out of the car with his cape. And David's like, he looks like a vampire with that cape, and the hat, it's like, and he said he just got out real nonchalant, like, just walking away.
His cape was just blowing in the wind.
Blowing, you were there, right, Tony?
Yeah, I was.
And I was like, but it was scary because he got his vehicle stuck. And I told Ryan,
and the train was literally coming down the tracks.
Yeah.
He's showing like how close it was. Yeah. It was crazy to think about.
We're laughing because he's alive.
Yeah.
Really.
But if he was, it'd be tragic,
But seeing young researchers like him, where it's like,
and his book is well written too.
Book is really well done,
yeah.
and he so carefully words things and so carefully says he is such a considerate speaker. But seeing folks like him, and I told them straight out, I was like, "You're the future of this, man." Seeing people your age picking this up. I mean, hey, I'm 48. I will do what I can for this industry as long as I can. Mm-hmm. My contribution is what I'm helping out with at your thing. I am a professional AV technician. All I do is high-end corporate AV. So if I can bring that skill set to what we do at things like Dogman, that's awesome.
Were you in Magnolia Conference? Were you there?
No, I did not get to make it to that one.
You know, here's what I'll say about Ryan, folks, and I'll give it to you straight. Ryan's going to be at my conference too.
Yeah, can't wait.
And he was going to speak. I said, dude, you can be on the panel or you can do whatever you want. I don't care. We got 2.5 days to do whatever.
Yeah.
But I told Ryan, I said, dude, you know, because he has no problem paying his dues.
Oh, yeah.
He's not a prima donna, because when I was at the Mineola conference, it was at the beginning of May, end of April, and it was hot as hell. And it was not this year, it was the year before last.
Yep.
And he sat out at his table in the sun, and I sat inside with Lyle and Ken and Nick Redfern and was yucking it up with them. And I look out there, and Ryan's out there just pouring sweat. I felt so bad.
Still in his top hat.
He doesn't take it off.
And so I went out there to take him a cup of water, and I felt really bad. I was like, I'm gonna take him a cup of water. But unfortunately, I drank it before I got to him, and it didn't happen. But the point is I messed with him. We went into that saloon right there.
Yeah.
And it was at the East Texas Bigfoot Conference, you know. So
where we first met.
Yeah, the Bigfoot Roadshow, whatever. He goes in there, and I said, "Dude, Ryan," I was like, you know, I was noticing you were just like out there pouring sweat with your books, whatever. And he's such a nice guy. Now I offered. He had 10 books left. I offered to buy them. He goes, well, I'll sell you 5. And I'm like, well, you little shit, why are you only going to sell me 5 books? I'm trying to help you out. He goes, because if there's a person that comes, they may want to buy my book, and then they you know,
I'm not going to not have
I'm not going to have it. So I told him, I said, oh, you know what, that's very considerate. He could have made the money right there and walked off.
Yep.
But he wants people to actually read his book, and now he's working on his second one. What you got to understand, this guy's 21 years old.
Yeah.
You know, he's mature for his age. And we were at the UFO conference. You know, I was sitting there, and I was watching Daniel Jones speak, and there was another guy, a Hispanic guy, I can't remember his name. He was really interesting, and I was sitting there watching it, and I keep looking up. I see somebody like something flowing up there, you know, and I look up and I see this purple cape or whatever, and I'm like, I told my wife, I said, that's Ryan. Ryan Edwards is up there, and he's like sitting over there looking down, like watching, you know.
Yeah.
And then he comes down, you know, and then we sat and we ate, whatever. And he's very, and one of the things that Ken and me had talked about, Ken said that he was talking to him and trying to give him advice, and that Ryan wasn't really taking, like he wasn't taking it. He's like, I think he got it, but I'm not real sure. But Ken's one of those people who he's paid his dues.
Oh, yeah.
So he looks at it as everybody's got to pay their dues, right? And so, you know, but what I said in Ryan's defense, and Ken wasn't bagging on him. Ken was just saying, you know, he goes like, I think, you know, he needs to listen more, you know, whatever. And he's right. But I told him, I said, Ryan is very intelligent. And I told him, I said, I think that Ryan knows what stage he's in. And I think he was trying to impress you, Ken. And I told Ken that. And I said, he wants to impress us, you know, and he wants to be heard, you know, that, and he has a lot to say. He really does. He has a lot to say. And he's got opinions on things that he
well-founded.
Yeah. He researches it and he thinks it out. Folks, we're talking about Ryan Edwards, okay? Don't get it confused with the other Ryan, that whatever. But Ryan Edwards, he's very good, and I have his books, a bunch of his books. But he'll be at the conference, and my books will be out. My first book will be done writing by the middle of July. It will be done, and then I will go to print, and it'll be ready. Should be by the beginning of August.
Awesome.
So that's the Dogman book, and then the Bigfoot book should be right behind. I'm just waiting on artwork for the Bigfoot book, and we're working on that and getting it done. But that's going to happen, folks, and then my books will be out, and then immediately I'm not going to rest on my laurels. I'm going to start writing a third one. But if somebody asked me too, they said, well, you know, Josh, you're a podcaster, you know, and you've done okay at what you're doing. They didn't give me the credit of saying I'm good. They said okay. And they said, then why do you want to be an author? And I said, and this is the real truth. I said, because I always had this weird feeling that what if technology fell? And all I had, you know, left was, you know, was the written word. And so maybe my books could be something that people could look at and read generations down the road, you know, and maybe that they'll be there for posterity. And I know that sounds kind of weird, kind of apocalyptic or whatever, but that is kind of where I So, we've been here for 3.5 hours. We're out of time, folks. I got to get home, and I got things I got to do. I got a bunch of stuff to do tomorrow. I got a meeting tomorrow about my build, the house I'm building. So please pray for me that goes well. Please, please, please. I need your prayers.
Oh, I also need some prayers. My grandpa's in the hospital right now.
Oh, man.
Because of pneumonia.
It's
He's
going
getting better.
around. It is definitely going
It
around.
is.
Thankfully, we caught it early, so he's definitely getting better, but he's still in there.
Many prayers.
And my friend Max, who I just talked to today, he nearly died from that same thing. So, and it's very deceptive because it'll attack your heart. People don't realize this. Like, it attacks your heart. Yeah. You can shut down your organs.
Yeah, pneumonia is basically water in your lungs, which puts more pressure on your whole chest cavity.
The guy survived Vietnam War, but he's not going to die to some pneumonia.
Yeah, and he fought the communists, which is something I like about him. But pray for his grandfather, too. And everybody, thank you to Christopher Jordan.
Hey, can't wait to be here for many more.
Curious Realm,
Definitely
and definitely going to have him back on. The guy's a light bulb of inspiration.
And just fun. I mean, this has been a great show. I think I can speak for everyone here. It's been just a really good time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And it always
thoroughly
is,
enjoyed
but
it.
I mean, I always have a good time talking to you.
Same, bud.
Yeah, I mean, and you're easy to talk to. Go check out my interview I did on his show. We talk about Dogman. Like I said, I always pull some stories out that I haven't released for the show, and I keep them for just going to other people's shows. And let me tell you something. I don't do a lot of shows, and it's not for lack of being asked. I only do shows that are my friends' shows. Now, once the books come out, I may have to go and do some shows, but I don't really not that I don't like it, it's not I have time.
Yeah.
And so people are always like, oh, well, you're stingy. You don't want to do this. You want to do that. I go on shows, and I got criticized recently because they said, well, you're going on these smaller people's shows. Why are you not going to go on my show? And I'm like, well, first of all, because I don't know you. And then, those are my friends. So, I didn't want to be rude to this person, but he was very pushy about it. And he's like, well, you do what you want. Blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to support you. And I'm like, oh, no, gee, you're not going to support me. Whoopee-doo. I've done this on my own for a long time,
Good on you for not being needy, Josh.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to call him up in the middle of the night. I'm sorry, I was wrong.
I was so wrong. So wrong.
Hey, man, I need to be on your show,
I need to go on
man.
your show, man. You got any more of them time
I
slots?
just need some more views, man.
It's not even like his show's that big. I mean, it's like, it's but
It's not even about that, though. It
just,
really isn't. It's about the proper conversation and about changing things, moving things forward in the world. That's what needs to happen.
And I don't know. I just don't want to go into a show and argue with someone.
Yeah.
That's my thing. It's not like I want to be in a yes tank or like where everybody has to agree.
Yeah,
but
nobody has to
I
be
want
in
to
an
have
echo
like-minded
chamber,
conversations where we could have, like this, where
I have no problems with the proper Looney Tunes parry thrust block of a conversation. No problems with it. Love it. Love it. That's what we're supposed to be doing is devils advocating each other and double checking each other. When it comes to the point of an argument, we've lost conversation.
Yeah, that's not that argument.
We aren't having a conversation. All we're doing is wondering why you don't think the way I think, and that I don't know. I got problems with that.
What is it? It takes like 7 seconds during an argument for someone to raise an octave. I forgot the science behind it, and then 11 seconds you're yelling.
Yeah,
yeah. It's like, and then it's like that's an argument. They're like, oh, don't raise your voice. Don't raise your voice. And it's like, well, because we're arguing. That's why you raise your voice, folks. I wanted to say 5x5 News says glad I subbed to this channel.
Hey.
You all rock. I am. I'm
my
glad.
good man Mike Turber.
Oh, okay. He says, I'm considered a researcher and use my channel as an investigative journalist to tell the results. Use video more than writing, but should write more. Yes, you should, 5x5. Let me lecture you all about that because I'm the guru of whatever. I'm kidding. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. But that's cool, though. And there was somebody else in here that was talking about, it was maybe she's already jumped off, but I wanted to say something. She was saying some interesting things here in the chat, and I wanted to hit it up. Penny Van, if you're still there, Penny, hit me up. I'd like to talk to you about your experiences and things. Alan Surgeoner says, Josh, we are so glad and happy that you stay with us after we almost lost you a year or two back. you decide to turn the hassles and trolls, grief into a reason to go on and help me. Also, yeah, sometimes anger can be fuel. And, when I was coming back from the conference, I was committed that I was just going to start writing for a while.
Yeah.
And I had talked to Lyle about that. And he's an English major, and he was like, and I'll help you. I'll show you, And of course, David Weatherly, Nick Redfern, Ken Gerhardt, and Barton Nunnally. You can't ask for better guys than that.
Yeah, I mean,
and they were all willing to help me write. And I was like, okay, well, let's do this, because we all became friends. And they were all
a mountain
friends,
of support, man.
Yeah,
that's incredible.
And those are big names. And they're like, dude, we'll get you going here. And then I got trolled. And I got messed with, and I decided I'm going to stick in and just to be stick a craw, in somebody's craw, and because it just made me so mad. So I guess sometimes it does work to your advantage, but negatively, I don't want any negativity. I'm done with all that. I try to stay out of it.
Yeah.
But Mike Turner says, I got some weird photos. Man, I got a treasure trove of weird photos, Mike, but I'd love to see those. Send them to me if you got some weird anomalies in the sky.
Oh, did you know Alan Surgener was an expert? Josh, no, wait, he says, one second. He had a funny comment I want to read out. Let me find it. I banged a stick on a tree in a forest in Washington State. Heard a howl, came back. I'm an expert on Bigfoot and Dogman now. Can I speak at the conference, Wolf?
Absolutely. Come and sit down and just school everyone on what you heard. And in the recording, it'll be like, okay, I'm going to play it back. Did you hear that? That's definitive proof right there.
Let me play it backwards for you. Here it is through a comb filter.
I'll slow it down.
It's going to keep going. We're going to keep playing it. We're going to loop it around here, folks. All right, folks, thank you for tuning in and everybody that donated. We appreciate it here at Roundtable. Everybody take care of yourselves, and I'll see you on Sunday night. And Sunday we don't have a guest. It's going to be me, but we have some stuff lined up. We got some good stories to tell you and some interesting conversation to get into. And thank you to my guest.
Anytime, bud.
Tony, if you could pan the camera.
Definitely.
There you go. And so everybody from Paranormal Roundtable, good night.
Good night.
Bye.